I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, as we go about the business of the township tonight, Help us all to be respectful of one another. Help us to do for the good of the entire community. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, roll call.
Gardner? Yes. Trustee Mike? Here. Supervisor?
Here.
Trustee Whitman? All here.
Now we've got the microphones and they give a little bit of feedback. So when you step up to the microphone to talk during public comment, make sure you turn it on. There's a little switch to turn it on. And then turn it off when you're finished. If there's a whole big crew, we'll leave it on for a while till everyone's done. And I just want to remind everyone that we are going to keep this meeting very peaceful and as we do at many public meetings. And as supervisor, I may order someone to leave the meeting, and if the person refuses, they can be charged with a misdemeanor. So I just want to remind everyone of that. All right. Any public comment on agenda items? Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please.
Was there an agenda after?
Right on the front page. No one? Someone getting that? Great. Just turn that microphone on. There's a little knob right there on the top. And state your name. I think it's on the microphone itself.
I can speak loud, I guess.
There we go.
There you go. Thanks, Kenny.
The first comment I guess I would say is that there's nothing in the Open Meeting Act that requires you to identify yourself when providing public comment. Regardless, my name is Eric Van Dusen.
Thank you,
The
Eric.
second issue, there's nothing in the Open Meeting Act that requires you to stay on topic with regards to agenda items during your public comment. So I don't know where you came up with that as a board rule or practice, but that's not something that's required under the Open Meetings Act. I believe your lawyer is on the agenda, so I believe this is on topic. Michigan Rules of Professional Conduct that all attorneys must follow indicates that, that's Rule 1.13, sub E, indicates a lawyer representing an organization, including governmental entities, may also represent any of its directors, officers, employees, members, shareholders, or other constituents, subject to the provisions of Rule 1.7. Then you go to Rule 1.7 of the Michigan Rules of Professional Conduct, and it states that a lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation of that client will be directly adverse to another client, unless, 1, the lawyer reasonably believes the representation will not adversely affect the relationship with the other client, and each client consents after consultation. Then sub B indicates a lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation of that client may be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibilities to another client or to a third person, or by the lawyer's own interest, unless 1, the lawyer reasonably believes the representation will not be adversely affected, and 2, the client consents after consultation. It goes on with some irrelevant information after that. It's my understanding that the treasurer has filed litigation against board members, other board members, and the township in her official capacity, and against board members in their official capacity, and the township under the Freedom of Information Act and a mandamus action to compel the township to comply to perform official acts. It's also my understanding that the township's attorney, who represents the treasurer, because she is the client, has filed appearances on behalf of the individual members of this board and to represent the township in a lawsuit that she has filed against individual members and the township. These ethical rules prohibit that. That is a huge glaring issue that needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with immediately, because you cannot represent clients that have absolute conflicts without every one of them consenting. And she has not consented as far as I know. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on to amend or approve the agenda. Under the Harbor Committee, we're going to be adding a $100 check for the dredging that will be issued to the state of Michigan, and that's a 5-year permit that we're asking for the dredging of the channel. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I need to put the $56 for the copies for the bank, just put them into the clerk.
Under clerk? Okay. Any other board members have anything they want to add to the agenda?
I have several items to add to the agenda. Number one, who authorized Mr. Rolfe to file an appearance on behalf of the township and board members for the lawsuit that was filed? Number two.
Under attorney comments?
Probably under new business somewhere. When was the decision made to authorize Mr. Rolfe to represent the township and officials?
Okay, so now, let's go back and get motions for these things.
You want
okay?
individually? I got 5 things.
All right,
Okay.
let me do the first one first,
Okay.
because I didn't realize you had this many.
Okay.
So let's make a motion to add to the marina the $100 for the dredging to the state of Michigan,
Sure, I'll make that.
okay?
I'll second that.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then add to the clerk's report, the signing of checks for the 50, for the copies.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so do yours individually so we can get motions,
Sure.
okay?
Who authorized Mr. Rolfe, the township attorney, to file appearances on behalf of the township and board members?
A motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, the next one?
When was the decision made to authorize Mr. Rolfe to represent the township and officials?
Go ahead and make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second? Okay,
Okay, number 3, has the claim been reported to Liberty Mutual Liability Insurance Company? I'll discuss
Are
that.
those motions or just a question?
That's
just
a
a
motion.
question.
We need to
Okay.
discuss it. We need to discuss it. Motion, not second. Number 4, Mr. Rolfe's conflict of interest representing the Arcadia Board in a lawsuit filed by myself. That's a motion.
is there a second?
Number 5, FOIA appeal from Kristen Poole. We have to respond within 10 days from this meeting date to her appeal, which will require a special meeting that needs to be scheduled today. Motion.
Is there a second?
You have them on record, though, Patty?
Yeah, they're all recorded.
Could, Madam Supervisor,
Yeah.
could I just suggest that,
Do you want to use the microphone, please?
I'll talk about,
Okay,
under the attorney's comments, item under old business, it's my intention to report to the board on various pending legal matters. One of those would involve Ms. Gould's FOIA appeal, the internal appeal with the township, and one of those would involve the suit that Deborah Eckhout filed against the township. And notwithstanding the lack of support for those motions to add those items to the specific agenda, I would consider those issues to be appropriately discussed during those respective items, and I would intend to do that
during attorney comments.
during each of those pertinent items
Yeah,
under pending legal matters. So
yeah,
whether you add them to the agenda or not, I'm going to cover, that's my intent, to cover most if not all of those items.
And I felt pretty comfortable with
Yeah,
that, so.
so.
All right. Any other amendments to the agenda? I'll entertain a motion to, well, we've already approved the 2 amendments. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Did you say aye? Thanks.
Treasurer's report.
None, my files are not available to me right now, so I don't have anything to make a report with.
Well, we have just the copies.
No, you have my files.
No, we have the files.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, that's
Yeah, we
what
have the
Gabriel
file.
brought to us, that's right,
Yep.
yes.
You do.
Yep, okay. Clerk's financial reports, listing of the bills, check signing, and your logging in account. You want to hit all those items?
Yes. Okay, everybody has a listing. I don't have any checks for you to sign now. I'll be doing checks tomorrow, except for these. Do we want to do these now or as they come through
As
as a
they come
motion?
through on the
Okay, so
agenda,
we're not
yeah.
gonna worry about that. So I'm asking the board to consider, allowing me to buy a Log Me In account. I had a printout in here somewhere. It's $349, and this is how Amy, our CPA, comes in now to our QuickBooks. And I have, thank you. I have gathered some support, and we are going to, as a team, try to bring the general ledger up to date. Gabriel has helped us by obtaining some records. I've also gotten some records from the bank. And Log Me In will allow me to do that from my living room instead of the back room. There is no security risk because nothing's stored on my computer. It's simply a secure connection, and our CPA uses it now. And it would be $349 for 1 year, and I don't feel that there would be a need to renew it once everything's brought up to date.
And that's a 2-user license.
That's a
correct?
2-user,
Yeah.
yes, so that,
So that-
yes, that someone else can be working on it, just
Yeah.
not myself.
That's good.
So, do I need to make a motion?
Yeah, why don't you make that motion?
Motion to allow clerk to buy Log Me In Pro at $349.99.
One second.
Thanks.
Deborah?
She says it.
No, I'm just.
Oh, sorry.
It's not a roll call.
All right.
Deborah? Mike?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? We will get that.
So then I would make a motion to pay these bills now.
Those are, that's the other list.
It's not the list of things.
No,
This is the list.
no. There isn't anything in the bills that's not, on the pre-approval. So it's just the electric bills and stuff, taxes.
All right, let's look at our minutes. First one's 1/11. Any additions or corrections? I'll entertain. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 11 minutes as stated.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the 126 special meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the 126-18 special meeting minutes.
I will make a motion to accept the January 18 minutes, or 26 minutes as stated.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Deborah? Let's see. Oh, so she's abstaining. The 129,
Okay.
the January 29th special meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of January 29, 2018.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 You're abstaining, Deborah? Okay, the only really correspondence that we got was the revenue sharing. And I think, Wes, you got a copy of that already that I sent you? The revenue sharing?
No, I have not got it.
All right, well, we'll make sure that you get a copy then tonight.
Okay.
Remind me, okay?
I do not have it.
Okay. Oh. And there wasn't any other correspondence that we received? All right, Harbor Committee.
You want me to make a report?
Would you please? Why don't you stand up to the
well, I
microphone? Or if you talk loud enough, you'll be good.
Yeah, there's ice in the harbour, so
Yeah.
no boats coming in or going out.
Yeah.
So there's not much activity down there. But I did notice today, and I told Jim, our handicap dock is heaving.
Oh,
The bubblers are not working around the thing. The ice is collected around the outside, and the ice has pushed the dock to the shore. It's got nowhere to go. So it's kind of heaved up like this. Big problem, because if we don't fix it, it'll cause damage to the dock. So I've asked Jim to go down there tomorrow, get the bubbler working, get some water flowing around that. So that the thing, it's a floating dock. It's meant to be in the ice, but it's not meant to have ice around it, because you've got the whole lake pushing up against the shore for that side. Other than that, I don't think there's anything really happening. There's only one thing that I just wanted to point out. Dick came up today, and I went down to the actual office there with him. Somebody turned off one of the electrical switches in the thing, and that's a big no-no, because there are protection devices for the underground fuel storage that's monitored by phone, and it gives them a warning if there's an issue, and when they're switched off, it doesn't have power to it. So that was a big problem. And we've taped up the switch now. I don't know who did it, because there's only 5 people with keys, and it wasn't me, it wasn't you,
yeah.
it wasn't Dick. But anyway, the thing was switched off. That's no, you've got to leave that switch on, because we have to have audits every month to show that we've had that tested. Otherwise, we can't get insurance on the premises there. So
Okay.
that will be taken care of now. We'll just sticker tape that. I'm pretty sure somebody turned it off innocently, thinking they were doing a favour, and that's all the problem. Other than that, I'm looking forward to the spring when the ice melts and we can get the marina open again and start getting boats and stuff. Looking forward to the summer.
Great, thank you. Yes. Okay, so Jim and I have talked, and he's got everything filled out. We only needed to have Steve's email address. We have that now. And we have to approve the $100 check for the dredging permit, which is good for 5 years.
And I would like to make a motion that we approve that dredging for the check
Okay.
for $100.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Let's do it's money. Deb?
Yes.
Yes?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay.
I should have pointed out, Janice, just to add that we are trying to get the marina dredged early this year. It took a long time last year to get that channel open. That had a negative adverse effect on the number of sailboats that could come in, because they were pretty much it was shallow. So I'm working with Jim to try and get that done by the end of May if we can. You can't really do it till the ice is out. You can only do it when there's no wind, because you can't dredge when there's any wind, which pretty much means nighttime, really. So, but our intention is to have that dredged before the boating season really takes off this year. That's what that, we've run out of that permit now. We didn't have a 5-year extension to do that dredge. So that $100, we need that to send off and get to
See, this is the check. And if you get a chance before I do to give him your address, because I'll be at school tomorrow, and I will get there probably till after 3:30, 4 o'clock. And if you get a chance, that's the last thing they need is your email address.
Okay.
It can be mailed right
Yeah,
out.
I can phone him, yeah.
Great.
I forgot my check. For the copies from us.
Oh,
So,
yeah. That's for the copies for West Shore, and that one she can see about, right?
yeah, well, she has to hand it, she can't hand it back to me,
Right,
so
right.
she has to hand it to Dick, because Dick's gonna go with me,
Oh, Dixon, okay.
and we have to turn it in tomorrow.
That's for the copies.
It's for our office.
Statements.
It's detailed. If that's, disagreeable, we can always do it.
This goes where? Mailed out or?
No,
give it to
Dick's,
Dick.
yeah, give it to Dick, because we gotta go to the bank. We're gonna meet with Amy tomorrow, and we're gonna go to the bank. And I knew you couldn't hand it back to me.
Anything else for the Harbor Marina Committee? All right, Planning Commission.
We had a work session, 2 Wednesdays ago, worked on updating definitions, and that pretty much took the whole 2 hours. We need to get those updates to you yet, get those cleaned up. Last night's meeting, we just distributed copies of the master plan to the new members and covered that, went over what the master plan is, how it influences, or rather how it guides our zoning decisions. And it was just kind of get everybody up to speed. We've got a lot of people, so that was helpful. And we have scheduled another work session to work on zoning text for February 21st. It's a Wednesday.
That'll be February 21st.
Yes, and John and Franco both reported that they have completed their citizen plan request.
Oh, great. So you need the clerk to public notice that meeting.
Yes.
Fire Department.
Yes, I got something that might be on the Marina Harbor too. This weekend, Bear Lake and Ekman Arcadia is having ice water rescue training, and we're looking for volunteers to rescue. 2 people, all it needs is 2 people. There, I got a hand over here. It'll be a joint training with the 3 departments for ice water rescue. It's going to be at Ekman, but we will be. Oh, I just been handed this.
It's a grant application.
I gotta leave. Well, anyway, that is this weekend, we're gonna be doing that, and, this year there's plenty of ice, don't have to worry about anything else. We've been at our, meetings, we've had a couple of meetings since the last one, checking our equipment, because the less we can take our equipment outside in this weather, the better, because the small lines freeze on our trucks. So we check the equipment over at our meetings and go over anything that we want to discuss, get it done in the winter time so we don't have to go over it in the summertime. We got outside stuff. And I think the last of our fittings and nozzles from our last revenue sharing grant came in today. I think I got the last one today. So that money has been spent. And Patty, I think there will be possibly another bill to add to that, so I can get the 2 check copies to, there might be one more. I told you I was going to do with 2, but I think there might be one more.
You want me to hold it, or do you want me to do it tomorrow?
You can do it tomorrow, because just so I get a copy of the second check, I gotta turn it into
Okay,
a machine.
okay.
So it don't matter.
All right.
And since the last meeting, we've had 5 medical runs, which is typically medical runs for this time of the year, but we have had 5 runs, and that's it. That's all I got. Any questions?
How will we volunteer for the,
Ice water rescue? You don't have to have a thong bathing suit? Very particular on the people who rescue diving.
But Wes, why do you want him in the thong and you aren't asking anybody?
Anybody else? I gotta watch, I might get in trouble. Don't tell my wife.
It's also going to be a polar bear.
That's all I have. Any other questions?
Thank you so much and thank all the volunteers. We have an amazing fire department. I think we should give them a grants. You got the grant application, so we're set with that. Okay, good. Cemetery, I don't think we've had any burials, and Arden hasn't called me to score anybody, so I guess we're good. Historical, anyone from historical that wants to report anything tonight? No. Roads?
Janice? was there
Oh,
anything
I'm
there?
sorry.
I don't go out very much after dark, but tonight coming past the Historical Society, the way they have it lit, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And again, that is all done with volunteers. No taxpayers' dollars go into that. That's all volunteer. That's just an amazing thing. We've moved that house, or they've moved that house, and all the wonderful things they've done. We're very, very blessed. Okay, roads. I don't want invoices on there. We really don't have them.
That never comes
I
up, and
know,
I
you
swear I
keep
take it off.
deleting it.
That's me.
Yep.
Oh, I miss it somehow.
Yeah. Junk and blight. Have anything there? Anyone here from Parks Commission this evening? No? Okay, old business, forensic audit report. Carl, you've got the mic, move it over there by you, and turn it on. Who?
Steve, could you turn that microphone off for us, please? We'll get bounced back.
Thank you. I assume everyone can hear me fine?
Yes.
Good. My name is Carl Heiser. I'm a CPA and certified fraud examiner. My partner is Laura Merchant. And we are wrapping up a forensic accounting engagement based on specific items that we were requested to do in our engagement letter. And to perform a forensic accounting procedure, we have to have specific predication or known facts that we have to look at before we can accept an engagement. We do not engage in fishing expeditions, as an example. We'll find something, we have to have evidence produced to us that we believe would call for further clarifications. And as forensic accountants, we dig a little deeper than an audit report. And some of the things we do as forensic accountants, as an example, I will interview individual people to talk to them about specific items that are in the engagement that we wish to clarify. And then most important of all, if there happens to be anything that is out of order or incomplete, or let's just say it's fraud suspicious, we have to have documentation to provide this information. We do not, as forensic accountants, determine guilt or innocence. What we do is put together an independent report that says we looked at this information, and this information would be forwarded through the corporate attorney or the township attorney, and then to law enforcement, and then they would make a determination whether there's probable cause that they should go forward on it. So I'm the collector of evidence. I don't determine if there's evidence to find. And the evidence usually, in every case that I've worked in, involves documentation, where there's been forgeries or altercation, or items that have changed. And so those were the engagements. That's the approach of the engagement. We do not issue search warrants. We do not perform what functions that we rely on our police department for. And our findings, many times, we do find items that are what I call need further investigation by law enforcement, and in some cases, we don't find any. It's simply a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge of how accounting is performed. Now, what I'd like to do is, in this area I'm talking about now is accreditation. What was presented to me on the initial phone call, where I talked to the supervisor, and I reported, or I documented certain specific items that would enable me to say, I think I have, the word is accreditation, that I should come in and put together a proposal and do an investigation. Again, there's no fishing expeditions that we do, like go find something, that type of thing. What I'd like to do is, our very first item that we looked at, it has to do with the audit report from Gatebridge and Company. Now, in the audit report, it's about 45 pages long, and in the very back of the section, there are what I call recommendations to, and they identify what they call deficiencies, in the audit report and in the organization that need to be corrected. And in these items that we look at here are serious, and it has to do with safeguarding assets. The assets that belong to the township. What I'm going to do here, I noticed I went back 3 years, from 2017 to 2016 to 2015. And the same 2 recommendations are in place. Looking for action, and I think the board took action by engaging me. One of the engagements one of these repeated deficiencies is separation of duties, specifically between handling the cash, recording the cash, and that falls within the job descriptions of the clerk and the treasurer. And so there has to be separation and sign off and items in place. That has been in there for 3 years. The other item that was in had to do with preparing accurate and financial internal reports for the board to review internally. And what the auditors indicated that they really don't want to have to come in and put them together. In other words, they're supposed to come in and look at the report, and for various reasons, whether it was economics or who knows what, I wasn't here. But, we still had that same recommendation again this year. In addition to that, there was a recommendation to reconcile bank statements on a timely basis. And then, in other words, every month. And then there had to be one with payroll about having approval and sign off, and I think that's been taken care of. But for the record, since we're here, Laura's going to mention, read the report to you of the items that have repeated themselves every year. So there is really no surprise that this item needed action. And this is one of the words of predication. And I think, Laura, you're up. Give me a break.
And this is just coming from the auditor's report that the board has seen, but they,
Can everyone hear her okay, or does she need to move the mic?
As Carl mentioned, there's material audit adjustments and financial statement preparation. It just goes on to say that the criteria, all governmental units in Michigan are required to prepare financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This is the responsibility of management. The preparation of financial statements in accordance with what we call GAAP requires internal controls over both 1, recording, processing, and summarizing accounting data, and 2, reporting government-wide and fund financial statements, including the related notes to the financial statements. And then the auditors say, we identified and proposed several material audit adjustments that management reviewed and approved. And then it goes on to say, as in the case with many small and medium-sized government units, the township, meaning this township, has historically relied on its independent external auditor to assist with the preparation of the financial statements, the related notes, and the management's discussion and analysis as part of its external financial reporting process. Accordingly, the township's ability to prepare financial statements in accordance with GAAP is based in part on its reliance on its external auditor, who cannot, by definition, be considered part of the township's internal controls. Having the auditor draft the annual financial statements is allowable under current auditing standards and ethical guidelines and may be the most efficient and effective method for preparation of the township's financial statements. However, when an entity on its own lacks the ability to produce financial statements that conform to GAAP, or when material audit adjustments are identified by the auditor, auditing standards require that such conditions be communicated in writing as material weaknesses. And then it goes on to say what the cause and effect is. It says the township's accounting records were initially misstated by amounts material to the financial statements. In addition, the township lacks complete internal controls over the preparation of its financial statements in accordance with GAAP and instead relies, at least in part, on assistance from its external auditor for assistance with this task. The auditors made a recommendation that says management should continue to monitor the relative costs and benefits of securing the internal or other external resources necessary to develop material adjustments and prepare a draft of the township's annual financial statements versus contracting with its auditor for these services. And then they also address the lack of segregation of incompatible duties.
What you just heard, that's been in our audit report for the last 3 years. Go ahead.
And same with this next one, the lack of segregation of duties. For the last 3 years, this has been in the audit report. Management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls in order to safeguard the assets of the township. A key element of internal control is the segregation of incompatible duties within the accounting function. The township has accounting functions which are performed by the same individual and are not subject to a documented independent review and approval. These areas include payroll, cash receipts, and accounts payable transactions. This condition is a result of limited size of the township's accounting staff. As a result of this condition, the township is exposed to an increased risk that misstatements, whether caused by error or fraud, may occur and not be prevented or detected and corrected by management on a timely basis. The auditor made the recommendation that says, while there are, of course, no easy answers to the challenge of balancing the costs and benefits of internal controls and the segregation of incompatible duties, we would nonetheless encourage management to actively seek ways to further strengthen its internal control structure by requiring as much independent review, reconciliation, and approval of accounting functions by qualified members of management as possible. And then they did go on to say that the township did concur with this finding. The township will require appropriate sign-offs of a second responsible person for key accounting functions. Another,
This is a new one?
yes.
Okay, this is the new recommendation. Go ahead.
And this is a new recommendation for fiscal year ending, this was for March 31st, 2017, the timeliness of bank reconciliations. Management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls in order to safeguard the assets of the township. A key element of internal control is ensuring the bank balances are reconciled to the general ledger in a timely manner, and those reconciliations are reviewed by a second responsible individual. The auditors found that the bank statements were not reconciled to the general ledger timely, and there is no documented evidence that the reconciliations were reviewed by a second responsible individual. The cause is unclear, but the state of Michigan is adamant that the bank accounts be reconciled in a timely manner. As a result of this condition, the township is exposed to an increased risk that misstatements, whether caused by error or fraud, may occur and not be prevented or detected and corrected by management on a timely basis. The auditor's recommendation was that the management places emphasis on the importance of these tasks being performed timely, and the township did concur with that finding. It says the township is examining potentially updating its computerized accounting system and processes and procedures to allow for reconciliations to be processed timely. And then finally, and this is also new for fiscal year end, March 31st, 2017, employee and department head sign off on a payroll time card. Management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls in order to safeguard the assets of the township. A key element of internal control is ensuring payroll time cards are approved by employees as well as the department head. It was noted that during testing that employee time cards were not signed off by department head and the employee. Best practices for processing of employee time cards is that both the department head and the employee sign off on the time cards to ensure accuracy of hours worked. The cause is unclear, but the township's general policy document outlines the township's processes and procedures to be followed relating to payroll processing. As a result of this condition, the township is exposed to an increased risk that misstatements, whether caused by error or fraud, may occur and not be prevented or detected and corrected by management on a timely basis. The auditors recommend that the township follows its established processes and procedures and consider implementing best practices relating to employee and department head sign-off on time cards. The township concurred with that finding.
Thank you. That's page 55 in your handout, the board members. What we presented here is, the word that I'm looking at here is predication. Do we have a problem here? So that by itself, there was more. Further, this covered, and this put together the scope of my examination and what I was going to look into based on this information. The second item for predication had to do with, and this has to do on page 40 of your handout. During our discussions on the engagement, the state of Michigan sent a letter citing a deficiency in the marina account of $2,309 that was reported to the state of Michigan, and they requested that an action plan be established to reduce this deficiency, which means you have to have accurate financial statements and reviews. And so a letter was sent, and the board approved it. We prepared the letter, and we've done this before, so that the state will say, all right, it looks like you have a corrective action plan in place, now follow it. So we put together a plan, it's on the record, and just when we thought it was over, and this is on page 40 of your handout for Board of Trustees, and then on page 44, about a month ago, we got a second letter from the state of Michigan, and they said if you fail to comply, we'll cut down on your funding until you comply. There was a reported deficit in the road fund of $72,820, which meant it was overspent. And so we have to have a corrective action plan to put it together, and what we were suggesting was a journal entry would be put in place to provide this funding out of the general fund. And so we sent that in. These numbers, by the way, that the state sent this inquiry on was from the annual audit report that was issued by Gatebridge and Company. So it's the final number, reconciled numbers here. And they're saying, we're letting you know this so you can have a corrective action plan. So we sent that in, the board approved it. And then we received, and this is on page 44 of your handout, we received a follow-up call. They call us, and they said, has the township made these journal entries to correct, this deficiency? So we're reviewing that right now. So they don't forget things. They want proof here. Not here. We just have to. This is compliance. That means you put it in the general ledger, you make the funding, and you move on. You just don't leave it, or if you don't know, you ask and go forward. Fund accounting is very complex. Most times it's not a debit or credit entry. You have to make 4 entries because of interfund transfers. I've been involved in this for over 25 years. So these things happen, but they are correctable here. Another thing that came to my attention
Can I make a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
On the,
Always.
on the deficit that the state is inquiring about, those can be prevented just by monitoring your budget. If you see that you are getting close and you're over expending, just a motion from the board to amend the budget before the year ends, that will eliminate that, and then you won't have to file this deficit elimination plan with the state. So that would be my recommendation. I know you're close to fiscal year end this year. You might want to take a very close look at that because it looks like there may be some funds that are operating in a deficit currently. So I would take a close look at that before year end, which is March 31st, to avoid that. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at having to file another deficit elimination plan with the state. And they do follow up on the action. The road fund is awaiting review. The state is looking for proof that the transfer was made. So I've got.
Amy's working on
Okay.
it. She wasn't exactly sure how to, especially with, like the other thing, so anyway.
Yeah, okay.
She wasn't sure exactly how to make that entry, so I asked her to either tell me how to do it and she said that, I spoke to her day before yesterday, and she said, it's a three-dimensional system, and she's looking into how to make that happen.
Okay, good.
That's very good. Then, we're talking about predication. Then the third item that came in, there's an incident report on file, and it was already filed, an incident report filed with the Manistee County Sheriff's Department. And the investigation is still going on. It had to do with allegedly suspicious entries that were in the general ledger or disbursements and checks that the board brought forward that said, we would like you to look into this, detective. And so what we did, in other words, that's what I call another form of predication, to get involved here. So we worked through this, and then I don't issue the report for the sheriff's office. I provide them the information, the board has the information, and then they'll make their own independent determination. I'm just the messenger. Sometimes I get shocked, but I'm just a messenger. And then, it's predication, then another issue that came to my attention, which was public, there was also a Michigan State Police investigation into the marina back in 2006.
16.
Pardon?
2016.
I'm sorry, 2016, thank you. That resulted in no action. It had to do with issues that are behind us. And, the marina kept coming up, with different issues here. So that's behind, and so what we're doing is, those were the predications, the reason why I accepted the engagement and we dug into this, and advised the board on what to do to go forward here. So, did I cover everything here?
Yes.
Sound good
Yeah.
here? All right, that's in my report. Also, what I found out too is, besides my engagement letter that's in the handout, Arcadia developed a general policy manual, and that's in my report here, in my package. And what it does, it spells out the job descriptions of, I'm just going to say, of the duties of the elected officials. So we don't have to recreate the wheel or not, and it was updated on looks like March 31st, 2017, in an effort to move forward here. So, we have my engagement letter, it's addressing these issues here. We have a policy manual, other things are being followed up on here, and I really think it's just a matter of getting a fresh start going forward. Just the way that our clerk talked about getting back with Amy about making the entries. I mean, they take time, and there's still the everyday actions that you have to go through. Anything else? Okay. What I'd like to do is, I'm going to just briefly go over what I call documents that are in my report. I'm not going to read them to you. You suffered enough already here, but for the record, I had to read the auditor's comments because those are significant. Those are telling. They all are correctable, and they have to be done, and they're in the process of being corrected here. In my board handout here, on what I call cross-reference A, you know, I have my forensic audit engagement letters, 2 pages. That was the start. And I put that letter together based on the accreditation of the issues that were brought to my attention. And being an outside independent person, I don't have any conflicts of interest here. The truth is the truth. I don't have to defend the truth. You know, it is what it is. And so the Part B talks about, and I think it's 13 pages here. It's the Township of Arcadia's General Policy Manual. It's 13. It's, you know, number of pages attached, 13 pages. Specifically in there, I did mention what the township officers, what their duties are, and also there was a question if the township had the authority to hire an accountant like me. On page 13 of the report, you'll see a list of authorized consultants, including board attorney, the auditors, and it says accountant. I'm an accountant, not the auditor, you know, to assist in these directions. So there was authorization that I can see here. And then on examination on on reference number C, I have a copy of this $200,000. Where did money go? That was part of the investigation back in 2016. And we resolved that. And on D, we do have a listing of what is the bank account cash reconciliations by the treasurer. That's on section D on page 21. I have a sample of treasurer's report on page 29. It's handout E. It's 2 or 3 pages long. And one thing that called my attention, and I did mention this to the board, and this is as of November, it shows that the road fund is in deficit again. So, you know, something has to be done to move this forward here. This is not intentional. I think it's just a lot of information that needs to be put together, and they'll say, oh, look at this, you know, so that's where they're striving. But I'm just saying we have some things still perking here. Okay. I included the Manistee County Sheriff's Office search warrant. I just passed it out to the board. It was 22 pages. And the reason the search warrant was issued in the first place, I had a very difficult time reconciling the marina funds. Not to say that things were hidden or anything. Records got misplaced, is my opinion. So I said, what I really need to do is get an official copy of the record. And so what was produced, a complete copy of the deposits that I needed to look at, and it was just what I needed. In other words, it was from the bank, it had the stamp dates on it. It enabled me, I didn't get this till the 31st or the 30th of January, what is today, the 8th? I couldn't have finished my report until I had that marina funds, and my report addresses that issue that we have a full accounting of the marina funds. Getting the records and follow-up needs to be worked out. I mean, the records were there, we just didn't have all of them, which is not unusual, but it's being worked on.
And why did you have to get the subpoena for the records?
I didn't get the subpoena, I requested the detective.
Excuse me, you requested the subpoena for the detective to get it.
I asked for a search warrant.
Yes.
Okay, I could not find the records here.
Correct.
You had an open case at the sheriff's office.
Right.
And they were looking for documentation.
So we had to get the bank records because you could not secure the records that were here locally.
Exactly, and so the detective sergeant was waiting to see what I needed, and then he would issue a search warrant.
Correct.
He did it, provided it, I had everything. You know, I should have had it a long time before, but we got it. You know, so that's kind of we need to organize our bookwork and et cetera going forward here. And then on page Page 40 is the marina deficit elimination plan and, you know, the report. And then on page 43 is the road fund deficit elimination plan. On page 50, I have a list of the Arcadia checking and investment accounts. That's what was provided me. I don't know if that is everything, all the accounts that you have. There could be others that I don't know of. It's just sort of a shopping list here. I just think the records need to be brought up to date. On page 58 is the Gatebridge and Company significant audit findings. Laura just went over that item with you in total. And then I attached on page 60 my CV curriculum data, you know, as part of the experience I have since 2005 as a forensic accountant. And I've been an expert witness in circuit court and also in federal court downtown Detroit, you know, where there's been fraud in food stamps and WIC. And so I, you know, worked in the federal court area with the FBI and prosecutors. All right, what I'd like to do in my report, that's the predication. And I think we made a big dent in moving this forward here. And I'm just glad the action that is being taken right now by the township board. My report let me get to the right page here, which is filed with the board. It's 68 pages long, and then, you know, I just passed out the search warrant results, you know, for the marina. That was another 22 pages. All right, here's our conclusion of our report, you know, that we've reached here. The first has to do with the transfer of the $200,000 fund. This has to do, there was an allegation here, money was taken out of the account without board approval. And it appeared, you know, those were valid questions, and the board did not know where those funds went. Upon further investigation, on November 21st, 2017, I made an inquiry to the township treasurer, Deborah Eckhart, regarding a $200,000 transaction made on 11/22/16. Treasurer Debbie Eckhart provided supporting documentation and a written explanation of the transfer and the withdrawal from the bank's money market account in the amount of $200,000. The amount was then deposited into the West Shore Bank checking account in the amount of $200,000. The issue is it came out of the general fund, and then within a reasonable amount of time, it was transferred to another account. I discussed this with the auditors. They reconciled the account, and so the $200,000, which, you know, the board had was concerned about, went from one account to the other. So it's been resolved, as far as I'm concerned here.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
You state here that Treasurer Deborah Eck explained the money was needed to pay the Manistee County Road Commission for road repair. But that road fund is allocated by an amendment to the budget, and that hadn't happened. And if the $200,000 had been deposited into the road fund, we would not have a deficit because we only wrote about $143,000 worth of checks. So my question is number one, okay, we found the money, but there still was no authority to withdraw it, and it did not go to the road account.
I think those are things you have to work out. It has to do with working within the organization between the two. The auditors reviewed it and they looked at it. It was in the account, and in spite of all that, you know, we still had a deficit. And then I think any further explanation, this is right off the audit report, which is a final adjusted report. In terms of if you look at the audit report, you'll see the breakdown, and any further detail on that $72,000, I think Gatebridge and Company will be able to answer that, how that was arrived at.
And this was the one that was signed by the treasurer and the deputy treasurer.
Yes.
And so the $200,000 that was withdrawn, and it is a withdrawal slip, there was no board approval to do so, and the deputy and the treasurer did that without the board approval, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a silly question as a concerned
no,
citizen?
no.
At the end, no?
It does sound like.
Public comment.
No. Can I ask, Debbie? You said that it was for the road account. Had there been discussion at the board meeting for that? Was there a resolution or anything?
You have to check the minutes.
Okay, I did quickly, but I didn't see it. Because my concern is it didn't get in the road account, and that's why we have a deficit. So I'm trying to understand how that happened.
Well, that would be a general ledger entry, and
So-
that would be entries. So, yeah, we talked about it because she was getting a big check, and the checking account didn't have enough money, so I just went to the bank and they transferred the money within 2 seconds. Pushed a button, took it out of one account into the other. So the journal entry should have been and I thought we made a motion at a board meeting to give the road fund, what was it, 70,000, 80,000 or something? Wasn't there a motion?
I couldn't find anything in the minutes, and I couldn't.
There's a motion.
And the
sure.
thing never went into the road fund.
Because when they went into QuickBooks
They
to
couldn't
look,
find it.
Well, I
you
don't,
can't find it in
general
QuickBooks.
ledger's not my.
It's in the general ledger because Amy found it
Right.
and did it. But my concern is the fact that, number one, was there a budget amendment and a resolution to move the money in the first place, because the money can't be moved without that? And secondly, it didn't go into the road fund, and therefore now we're in a deficit with the state of Michigan where there shouldn't be one.
But the professional is telling us it's not an issue. You're out of
It's
order.
not an issue as far as missing money.
Correct.
Second, all transactions to a clerk and a treasurer.
Exactly. And that was the concern, because it was done with the treasurer and the deputy treasurer, and the clerk and the treasurer need to be doing those transactions.
It wasn't an
for
expenditure.
internal
It wasn't an
control.
expenditure, Janice, it was just a
So it was
transfer.
a withdrawal. Okay.
I think you're wrong.
Well, do you want to look at the slip, because it says right on there?
I know if you signed it, no, I'm saying
Withdrawal,
the
money
treasurer,
market withdrawal.
the treasurer can make transfers without board approval. Look in your red book.
Oh, I know you can make transfers,
Yeah.
but this was a withdrawal.
No, it wasn't a withdrawal.
All right, let's just move on.
Okay, may I go on?
Yep.
Okay. The second issue that was raised had to do with a $34,510.96 fire department check that was written. In my report, I looked at check number 12924, and I have it written as August 29th, 2017. But in our copy, it looked like an 8, but it was really a 5. So in the report on page 1 of my report, I'd like you to strike through the 8 and call it May 29th, 2017. So there was a general fund check that was written out of West Michigan National Bank on May 29th, 2017. There's an explanation. Is that yours or mine? Laura, that's yours. Excuse me, I take a break here.
We both looked at it, but as Carl stated, that we noted the correction of when the check was originally written. It was May instead of August, and I examined a copy of the check. What was interesting is the check was written in May, but it was not deposited into the fire department account until September 19th. So I made an inquiry, and apparently there was another checking account that was trying to be opened, and there was some trouble with that. So in the end, what had happened is that check was deposited into the fire department, but not until September 19th.
So where was that check sitting the whole time, from May to September?
In the safe,
Safe, where?
at my house.
Undeposited township funds were in the safe in your house.
No, they were a check written from the general, it never left the treasury, Greg. It was a check that was written from the general to the fire department. The money still was in the bank at the general checking account. You wanted me to open an account at Honor for the fire department. I tried twice to get minutes from this board that the Honor Bank would accept, and you didn't make those minutes.
They
And
were online, and I talked to Honor Bank, and they said there was no problem 15 minutes after we left. Yeah.
when?
When you tried, when I was clerk, so it had to be in August when you,
Okay.
and
went-
I called, when you said that they wouldn't let you open it,
Right.
I called the bank and I said, spoke, I believe, to Holly, and I said, the minutes are online. She looked them up, she said, okay, I'm sorry, Debbie didn't say that, and then I let you know that.
Okay, I went twice to try to open that account with that check, they wouldn't let me. And then I went again when a check was, I think I got it from Wes, to see if I could open up an account, January, I think, sometime, they still wouldn't let me open it, so I couldn't open it, so I just put it into the existing fire department.
Maybe I missed it, I'm sorry, my phone was ringing, I meant to turn it off, but why were you trying to open another account? Did I ask
The
that?
former clerk, didn't want the fire department checking account to be at the state savings bank, because none of our banks can, checks are checks for double signatures, because of check 21. But she wanted those accounts moved to Honor Bank, and I tried to do that, and they wouldn't let me.
Well, that's what the board had approved,
Right,
to do that.
right.
And so that check, that was issued back in May,
Right.
and in September, that still is when it finally got opened.
Never
It
got
never
open.
got opened.
Never got open.
So it never got opened?
Never got open. They still won't let me do it.
Oh, okay.
And they told me no problem.
You
Yeah.
can talk to
Yeah.
Pam. Pam is the manager at the bank, or you can talk to,
I guess I just have a hard time believing a bank won't open an account for a
me
municipality.
too, I went 3 times. I went 3 times.
All right, go ahead. Do you have anything
The
else?
money never left the treasury. It was in the general checking until I deposited into the fire department.
There was still a check floating around for 4
Yeah,
months.
for 4 months there was a check floating around.
Not floating.
Well, but it left and it was at your home.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a check that was issued and for
I don't
4
have a
months.
safe here, Janice. There's no safe for me to use in this building.
You don't need a safe.
Okay.
There is a fire safe, I'm not saying
I
that
don't
I
have a
would
key to it.
happily, but you have your own that you were gonna bring. I just really don't wanna open this can of worms again. Let's just move on.
You just gone through it. All right. Go ahead, Laura.
I had nothing further than that, because I could see the end that it was ultimately deposited in September, so I don't have further comment regarding that. Other than it was 120 days of an outstanding check. And that would have been, if the bank reconciliations were done timely, you would have seen that every month as an outstanding check written.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna go on to the,
Excuse me, can I ask a follow-up on that? So I just want to be clear in my mind. A check was written.
Speak up a little bit.
A check was written on May 29, 2017,
Correct.
with the idea that it would be used as a deposit check to open a new account
For the fire department.
at a different bank
Right.
that the board wanted to have open.
Right.
But the check was never deposited in Honor Bank because the account was never able to be opened.
Right.
And I guess what I'm quibbling with is I'm hearing that the check was deposited back into another account in September.
The existing fire department.
But would it actually have been deposited, or was it just never implemented? The check was never negotiated,
The check was written from the general checking.
right? But was
Right.
not negotiated.
No, right, no,
So
it
the
was just,
34,510.96
right,
never actually left the general fund.
that's right.
That's
Until
what I'm trying to.
September.
Right.
Until
And then it
September,
went to the fire department.
Yes. And then it was put in the existing fire department.
So a new
It went
account was
from
never
one
opened.
account.
So it was drawn on the general fund.
Yeah, it was
That
money
went
that
to
was due
a
the fire
fire
department.
department fund in another financial institution.
I
Got
got
it.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We're gonna go on to the next item that was a concern that had to do with the marina funds and $150 advance for petty cash or cash for the marina.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I inquired about the $150 and I heard conflicting stories of where it came from and what it was used for. I wasn't able to trace $150 coming and going out of the marina fund. In the scope of things, $150 for forensic audit purposes is immaterial. I couldn't track it down, so I don't have further comment regarding the $150. And then I just wanted to make a comment on the marina account in general. It was impossible to reconcile the deposits into that account. And I think that was mostly due because the deposits weren't made on regular intervals. And I think that had been an ongoing problem, and I think Amy Plumstead had recommended, maybe doing some of the deposits in regular intervals so that they can be traced. I can see that deposits are going in, but I have no way of knowing from what I looked at that the amounts, what was supposed to go in there. And I looked at the harbor, there's a daily sheet that's printed and supposed to be reconciled. And as I understand, there's a bank deposit slip that is prepared by the harbor master and placed into that sealed bag. That's what I had required and asked to look at. Because it sounded like the cash was reconciled on a daily basis, but I couldn't trace that. There were no daily deposit tickets produced from what the harbor master had created.
Amy did give me some direction for that. She said I should pick it up every Monday, picked up on the same day, and then deposit it on the same day. And I did try to get it every Monday, but it always didn't get deposited on Tuesday. Sometimes it would be Wednesday. I did talk to Manistee City Treasurer. They have a marina too, same situation that we have. And he said that they just made out a deposit daily, collected the money, made out a daily deposit. And so even if you took it to the bank, 2 deposits in one day, it still had its individual daily deposit. So that's the way we'll do it next year.
Okay.
Every day is a separate deposit.
That's
So okay.
All right, so I just have a couple of yes or no questions. I don't need any explanation. No, just a couple questions, I just want to know. Okay, we're all board members. The marina has a small safe, yes or no?
Yes.
And in that safe, there are daily deposits.
I think she should refuse to answer these
Sealed.
questions.
Sealed.
I really think she's
Sir, you're out of order.
interrogated. It's not
You're out of order.
interrogation.
You're out of order. You're out of order, disrupting the meeting. The daily deposits are placed into this bag, correct? Yes, it is. Yes or no? Are you refusing to answer? Okay.
Well, I don't want a yes or no. I just want to understand, because it is our policy that the deposits be picked up and deposited, they're Sunday through Monday. That was edited, or that was, as far as I could see, amended on the 3/17. But I want to understand, we have a daily deposit that's sealed in here with a deposit slip and then a matching sheet, okay? You choose to open these and then mix them and then deposit them.
Per week.
And, well, they don't match weeks, that's the problem, is we can't find any record of, and so that's why the accounting doesn't match. But why do you need to open these?
I think you should speak to her attorney about that if you want to ask those types of questions.
Sir, if you interject again, I'm going to ask the sheriff to remove you. I've asked you please to stop interjecting.
What is it against the law for me
We
to
can
talk to a
ask
fellow
these
board member?
questions, we're board members.
So I just am trying to understand if there is a statutory reason that these have to be opened by the treasurer. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out, because these all match right here, and it would be super easy to reconcile account that's not
So what are
reconcilable.
you saying it should do with the wet plastic bag then?
Take it to the bank just like this. It's got this slip in it. They'll open it up, and if there's a discrepancy, you would know immediately.
Dana said no, they did not do that.
Oh, yes, they do.
It's a deposit bank.
I'm done.
So that would show a daily deposit. The teller, you could hand her 6 of these. The teller would open each individual one. That would coincide with the daily receipt deposit. And then they would give you 6 separate receipts. This is deposit June 4th, June 5th, June 6th. You open these and commingle those funds, and it doesn't reconcile with the Marina account. And that's why we've had issues, and we can't reconcile anything.
I understand.
So, could I circle back to a couple things on the marina issues,
Sure.
just to make sure I understand? On the infamous $150, I understand that that might not be material for your purposes, but as an auditor, from an auditing perspective. But I'm also assuming that it's not a real nifty idea for the township to not have any idea where $150 came from. Is that a reasonable
Yes.
statement?
Yes.
And I'm reading in your report that there's some terms here that are used, where one individual explained that the $150 was not, quote, starting cash, close quote. It was just an, quote, auxiliary bank, close quote. Did you understand that distinction, or did you think there was a distinction between those terms?
No.
This was some kind of startup cash that came from somewhere, right?
I've never heard the
As
word
far as you know.
auxiliary funds.
Nor have I.
Auxiliary bank. All right, so as a matter of going forward, if an employee or an officer of the township working with the marina needs to supply, I'll use the term starting cash, to make change and so on. You have tens on hand, ones, fives, quarters, or whatever it may be. From an accounting perspective, am I correct in understanding, is the board correct in understanding, that $150 should not come from the official's pocket? That should come from and be accounted for through township funds, right, as a debit of some sort?
That's
Right?
good business practice, yes.
Well, I would think, otherwise, you've got $150, in this instance, it's $150, but what's the next time? If the same sloppy procedures are used, isn't there an issue there? Even though it may not be material, isn't there an issue there as far as proper procedures to account for that money?
Good practices.
All right.
Do we know where the money came from?
No.
It was your personal money?
Right.
I think, but, I'm surmising, and I did from the beginning, that Debbie fronted the cash probably because it was convenient in the circumstances.
Well, no, from what I.
Not that that was right,
No,
but
but
that's
from
my
what I
assumption,
understand,
that's
there
what
was a check that was supposed to be cut, and it was supposed to be cashed, and it was asked for prior to Arcadia Days so that they would have change. So that would have been the proper procedure.
Because
What
the
check?
harbor master
What check?
asked Patrice to cut a check so he would have extra change if he needed during Arcadia Days, since we don't have a bank in town and you might need some extra change. And Patrice was told, no, that you would take care of it. And so no check was issued from the marina to show that there was $150 petty cash given to the harbor master. You went to your home and
I don't know what you're talking about,
the
Janice.
$150.
I know, but I don't, anything about a conversation with Patrice asking for a check, I never did that.
Okay, so, but you're saying that $150 was your personal money?
Right. And,
And then it went into play in the marina funds and into the
and
cash
Dick
register.
knew
and
it
all
was
that.
just a bag so that I didn't have to go to the bank for him twice a week. And, didn't have to charge mileage, so,
So you commingled personal township
you know what, I will never do it again. I was just
But
trying
you
to be
did do that.
nice.
You
And I
commingled personal
didn't
funds.
commingle, I gave him a bag with $150 to make,
that's what they call
pick up.
Well,
the-
that puts it in the play.
Guys,
and
I
it's
will never do it again. I'm sorry, forgive me, it's not gonna happen again. If you want me to make a donation to the, marina of $150.
Let's not go through the dramatics.
Okay,
It's
so,
just the fact
You're
that
You
fine.
guys are being dramatic.
You're
while
fine.
we're, if I may please, while we're on the marina issues, just one other question about these deposit procedures, again, with the idea of how's the township properly move forward with these procedures. What I'm reading in the report, last page of the primary summary, indicates that the cash procedure, which was to seal all daily cash receipts in a plastic sealed banking bag for deposit, that, I'm inferring that that's an adequate procedure to that point, right?
Yes.
That accounts for those, it provides an opportunity to account for those cash receipts from that day intact.
It gives you a point,
Separate.
it gives you a point in time to have a number that you need to balance to.
Okay.
In other words, this is the balance to what went to the bank.
And so
Got it.
once the envelopes were open,
So that's where I'm trying to understand. So the problem was not with that part of the procedure. The problem was when those sealed bags were, from multiple days, were open and combined into one amount on a deposit slip, correct? Do I get that right?
Yes.
You're right.
Right.
And we can't match them back in any way to the system, the data. We can't get them to balance.
Because of not, is that
The
because of
the amounts-
uncertainty as to the,
Well,
which days
we
went
don't know
into?
which day they are, and that's not broke out on the deposit slip. So basically, you have all these sheets and you've got to mix and match and try and figure out where they came from, and we can't do it. Amy tried to do it, and the amounts wouldn't do it.
Okay, so,
We can't do it.
can't
so
be
that,
reconciled.
that's an issue that you just, I take it from, through last season, you just may not be able to completely reconcile. But going forward, what I'm hearing is that if Debbie were to retain this daily sealed bag system, and open, at some point, I think she has to open that bag and count the money in that bag, and then she would prepare a deposit slip for the amount of money that she counts in that bag.
Why did she have to open it? I'm trying to
She has to
understand.
prepare a deposit slip.
But the deposit slip's already done.
and the deposit slip's done it in the bag, can't
Already
be
done.
done.
What, a bank deposit slip?
Yeah, it's already done. Everything's run through the,
Maybe they should call it together.
I never saw any bank deposit slips in the bags that I opened.
what,
And I've got the official deposit
Okay,
slip,
but you,
so.
yeah.
I have to take charge of money at some point, I've got to look at it, I can't think
yeah,
of it.
wouldn't I'm thinking,
But I will do it daily, I didn't know I was supposed to do it daily.
all right, so.
And I will.
You're not required to do it.
No.
But-
Policy
On a
manual
regular
doesn't.
basis.
But the deposit slip needs to match the dollars and cents in each bag.
Right, I understand.
One deposit slip
Yeah, per bag.
per
Per bag.
deposit slip per bag.
And they don't.
No, I did.
But that's because
I
the
did one-
different daily bags were commingled,
Right,
Correct.
and there was no way to apparently track the dollar amounts per those bags with total,
Sales.
per-
Yes.
the daily
And this
slip.
with
was
point of sale
discussed.
records.
And it was asked not to happen, because that's in the record.
I get that, and then, so, but going forward, there's nothing wrong with the sealed bag procedure, I'm hearing. And as long as the treasurer accounts for the dollars in each of those sealed bags and reflects the amount of money on each sealed bag on a separate deposit slip, and that those records are shared, obviously, with the appropriate officials, primarily the clerk, then there shouldn't be an issue. Is that a correct
For
understanding
the
of my
cash,
part?
there shouldn't be an issue.
Going forward.
Going forward, yes.
That doesn't solve the whole problem of the marina because we still have state of Michigan deposits. But for the cash, that would fix the cash.
But the state of Michigan deposits, which I understand are accounted for separately, those are, they're never gonna be in the plastic bag for that day, that's
what I said,
cash.
that's cash.
All right,
That solves the cash.
okay. Thank you.
Can we go on?
Yeah.
Okay. Or deficit.
Yes, we touched on that briefly already. There were two of them. The township received notification for the marina deficit, and this is on page 40 of the report. That has been resolved. There's been a deficit elimination plan filed with the state of Michigan, board resolution approved. However, the road fund also had a deficit, and we touched on this too. They're just, the state is asking for proof that the transfer from the general fund has made its way into the road fund to cover the deficit. And you've addressed that and working with.
It's all in the general fund, it's just a journal, I can't say just a journal entry because as you said, it's gotta be done a particular way. So Amy's trying to figure out the best way to do that to represent it to the state.
Okay, good. Nothing further on that. And then, one other item I noted, the payroll taxes have not been paid.
They're paid.
They're paid now, okay. Okay, late then, there would have been interest and penalties assessed.
They were paid late.
Is that something that's gonna be done in-house, or are you hiring Amy?
Well, as soon as we can get the accounting in order, I'm hoping to take that over myself.
Okay, good. Nothing further with that.
All right, what everyone's been waiting to hear is a conclusion of our examination. Okay, not that much. In our page 3 and 4, we, conducted our forensic examination of a $200,000 transfer of money market to the general fund, and without reading the whole report, the money's been accounted for. My question is the money there or not? Not the, we didn't know, or it's late, in other words, if it went from A to B, that's all we need to know here, as forensic accountants. Also, the funds were owed to the fire department from the general fund up to $34,510.96. While there was some delay and so forth, the money was accounted for 120 days later. So it went from A to B, it's still accounted for. And also the marina account suffers from a lack of proper internal controls. You heard the debate here about how these things, about the bag and the transfer, it has to happen, it's in place. And I think once that is in place, we'll have a smooth ship, so to speak, here. The marina is a very valuable asset here. And then the procedures here are minimal and a correction is recommended. And based on the nature of my review here, I didn't find anything that was fraudulent that I can produce as a document that says, here is missing money. We have a $10,000 check, as an example. It was cash, and nobody knows what happened. And what we would do then, we'd request law enforcement to get a copy of the check and see who signed it and who got the money. That's called documented evidence. Right now, we have a lot of different views on what happened and how it happened, and a lot of it is procedural in nature. But when it comes right down to what I call provable intentional fraud, we have none. That doesn't mean that there could be, but based on my examination of the facts here, we have no recommendations of fraud or findings of fraud, and that's my conclusion. Any further comments?
So, on page 4, you say, based on the nature of fraud, no assurances can be given that fraud does not exist. However, based on the results of your examination, we found no direct evidence to support the conclusion and findings that Arcadia Township assets were misappropriated.
That is correct, and the word is documented evidence here.
Correct.
So,
But we
Don't
still,
have documents.
because we don't have documents.
and I also said that doesn't mean that it happened someplace else, but based on my charge, my engagement letter, there's nothing I can produce that would go to the sheriff's office where he would review it and see if the prosecutor will issue, a warrant. We don't have anything. We have a lot of records that are behind that need to be caught up. I think can be fixed. That concludes our report.
But we still have concerns of unreconciled accounts, correct?
Yes, we haven't, thank you for bringing that up, but our records are reconciled in good form by an outside accountant that we're paying, it's not me, through May of 2017. That means the records and the bank reconciliations have to be done for June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. We got 8 months of hurry up and catch up. It can be done, and it should be done.
So those are our concerns. We still have unreconciled accounts.
Yes, we do.
We still have issues of malfeasance, incompetency, lack of internal controls, and deficiencies.
Some of those words are yours.
Yes, right, but I'm just, I'm asking, Carl, when you and I have spoken, those are still concerns that we have as a municipality, correct?
Yes, as a municipality, you need to
We
work
still
through
have,
these.
yes,
You need to work through those.
all right. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
That concludes our report.
Thank you, Carl, very much. Thank you, Laura. I know you guys worked hard.
They really did. They worked very hard. Really good report. Attorney issues.
I have probably 6 issues. Actually, before I do this, I want to, was it Eric?
Correct.
His first comment, that's spot on about the Openings Act. I suspect that that's just a lingering thing on the agenda from who knows what meeting in the past, indicating that the public comment period is for agenda items. That should not be, those 2 words, agenda items, should not be qualifying the public comments item on your agendas for regular meetings or special meetings.
Also, when we have public comment.
But that's why we have public comment at the end again, so we can have agenda items to deal with, so we can get information from the public as we deal with agenda items, and then we have public comment again at the end, so people can make any comment on anything they
If
choose
it
to.
can't be on there, we just take it off. It's been on there forever.
I can appreciate that distinction, but I think it would be preferable if you, for people who were here at the beginning of the meeting, but who may not be here at the end of the meeting, it would be preferable if you were to not limit that
And we
scope
don't
of
give
public
2, we
comment.
just give 1 public comment.
So we can just have one public comment at the beginning and that would be sufficient?
That is sufficient, and by the way, you have that same qualifying 2 words in your policy and procedures manual. I think it's section 3.4, yeah, 3.4B. So there might be a cleanup issue there. Anyway, Okay, some of these things can be dealt with perhaps fairly quickly. First of those, which perhaps can be dealt with quickly, the township has a pending appeal from a denial of one aspect of a FOIA request presented by an attorney on behalf of, I believe, a township resident. And that appeal was brought forward in the form of what I typically call an internal appeal. When a party feels like they were improperly denied public records, they have the option, their option, to either seek redress through this internal appeal procedure to the, in this case, the township board, or they can just go right off to circuit court. If they're not happy, if they pursue the internal appeal route and they're not happy with the outcome, they still have the option to go to circuit court. The requester in this instance chose the internal appeal route, and I provided a memorandum to the board that I believe informed the board of everything and anything I wanted to say to provide legal guidance to the board, including a recommendation for how the board might proceed with the matter. And because this is in the nature of pending litigation, I don't propose to discuss the particulars of that memorandum, nor would I propose the board members discuss the particulars of that memorandum in open session, in a public session.
Craig?
However,
Craig,
sorry, go ahead.
Did you give everybody whatever you just talked about, they're provided with documentation, what you're talking about, or just Jamie? You said
No, we got
everything-
it, and yours was sitting there, and I picked it up and took it back in the office, because you weren't at the meeting,
Okay.
that they came out, and so
Is
it's
it
in
in
the
my box?
office.
No,
I do
it's
not
not in my
know.
box,
I
okay.
don't know. It sat up here, it got left out here, and I just snagged it, yeah, so,
Okay, so you've not
I'm not seeing
reviewed the memorandum?
no.
Well, the path I was going to suggest to go forward, it may or may not be suitable now, was to suggest that if the members of the board are comfortable with the recommendation in that memorandum, which provides, I think, a path towards resolving that matter completely, then there may not be a need for any board discussion in a closed session, and the board could simply direct me in open session to proceed as recommended in the memorandum. If we're going to talk particulars of the recommendation, then I would have to advise the board go into closed session, because that I did provide legal opinions in the matter, and this is also in the nature of pending litigation.
Well, if she hasn't read it, what can I do?
Well, it's,
What?
in my opinion, it's not fair to ask a member of the board to vote on the
Something
matter.
they haven't
She hasn't
seen.
had an opportunity to review the memorandum.
Absolutely.
So,
Because I know you made copies and sent it to co-author, and then you didn't come to the special meeting either.
No, and I
And then I know
actually,
you
it
moved
just
it
got
when,
left
what?
on the table. and I
Saturday I
haven't-
had class.
On Saturday, because it sat here
Yeah.
on Saturday. Because you were in Township Hall, you were in Township Hall when Gay Bridge came. Monday. Yeah, and it was here then.
Not my box.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was
on
sitting
the
in your
table.
seat, it got
Yeah.
left there.
No big deal, but since you didn't have an opportunity, you're absolutely right.
well,
So what is your
I-
suggestion that we do, since she
I
didn't have
need-
an opportunity to read it?
Unless this matter is going to be addressed at a special meeting, which would be unfortunate if you had to go that route, I would think, I need determination by the board on the recommendation tonight, or some other direction from the board on how to proceed, because of the timeline associated with the township response to the matter.
Because these are dealing with the subpoenas.
No, it's
No,
different with
no.
this, just this
No,
one.
okay.
This is the Hool,
This
Kristen
is the
Hool
whole, this is this
FOIA
one.
appeal.
Oh, the whole one, okay.
Sorry, I should have indicated the name.
No, you,
Sorry.
I was on, we were.
So, do we,
Well, do we have a, do we
Circle
have a
back to
choice?
that?
We're gonna have to, she's gonna have to be given an opportunity to read through it,
yeah,
so.
can we circle back to that potentially at the end of the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah,
And perhaps go into close, perhaps not?
yeah,
But any decision you make will have to be an open session, of course.
right.
Okay, so that was one that I thought was gonna be quick.
Good luck with
The
that.
second one might also, however, be actually quick. That's the status of Paul Smith's trespass claim against the township, and also there's apparently potentially a township trespass allegation against Mr. Smith. I put this on my list of things to ask the board about as long as I was gonna be here, simply to confirm whether or not the board is satisfied with the sufficiency of me communicating the township position as previously discussed and communicated to me by telephone to Mr. Smith's attorney? Or do you think there should be a written follow-up indicating the board's position to Mr. Smith's attorney regarding his trespass claim against the township?
I guess,
Well, go ahead.
well, I just feel if there's a threat of litigation, you should always respond, at least in writing, so there's record. But that's.
But should we wait for Mr. Smith's attorney to,
My recommendation would be that you direct me to send a letter to Mr. Smith's attorney, just in the nature of, as a follow-up to our telephone conversation, or confirming our telephone conversation on such and such a date. It's the position of the township board that, sincerely.
I think that's
I
why.
think that was too.
Well, I do too, but it's a board decision.
What do you
so.
think?
Yeah, I think.
In writing,
In writing?
I think, because at least there's a paper trail
Yeah,
and no misunderstanding of our position.
correct.
It'll be short.
Okay, should we make a motion?
Please, direct me to do that.
I'll entertain a motion. We direct our attorney to send a letter to Mr. Smith's attorney concerning the trespass issue. Anyone who wants to make that
I will
motion?
make that motion.
Is there a second?
Excuse me, and that would reflect the position the board's already taken, as I understand it. The previous meeting that was communicated to me by phone, or I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Deborah?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
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 Patty? Aye.
Okay, next one should be really short. Just a status update on the weed special assessment delinquency issue that we discussed at the special meeting a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was. The township board addressed that issue by a resolution adopted at that meeting on January 26th. And I think you, at least the principal officer of the township knows that the county treasurer did subsequently confirm to me in writing by email that the property at issue was timely pulled from the circuit court foreclosure action prior to the judicial hearing, which was scheduled for this morning. So there is no further board action needed. This is simply a matter of reporting to the board that that matter has been resolved. Subject to whatever the refund issue is, and I communicated to the township on that previously. So
Refund? What, there's no refund. is
there were, maybe at the special meeting, we have a real time issue because the
Right,
circuit court
But I
foreclosure
thought
hearing
we
this morning.
just hadn't paid those taxes, but there is a refund?
I thought he'd paid, did they not pay, they didn't pay either?
I don't think they, I don't know.
Then there is no refund, I'm sorry, then there would be no refund.
Right. I don't think there is.
I'm sorry, whoa, it's a refund, reimbursement of the county
Hey, yeah.
tax delinquency fund.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the county, when those two
Right.
special, not paid, the county paid the township for those 2 years,
Gotcha.
and then,
But not to the taxpayer, I got it.
right,
And the
right,
treasurer
right, right,
never
right.
charges interest.
And the county treasurer graciously offered to waive the accumulated interest, which would be quite significant. So it's a fairly nominal amount that the township will have to reimburse the county to make them whole, because the action taken by the Board of 26 zeroed out those special assessments because that property was not intended to be on the roll. So subject to the reimbursement of the county, treasurer and clerk can square away on that, that matter is done. But that reimbursement should take place soon.
Do we have a bill from them? Have you got anything?
I haven't seen anything come in the mail yet.
Well, I
I'll check
don't know what the
with
procedure
Maybe
is,
call
but
Jerry,
Who?
was it the county treasurer?
Ross.
Ross, sorry.
I'll check with
but
them.
you two can follow up on that, and you shouldn't need anything more from me on that. Okay, so no board action needed, but clerk and treasurer to coordinate with county treasurer refund. Okay, this last one, excuse me, the last one on this page is just a reminder from me that I'm still in need of board action at some point on the fees that would be associated with the different types of applications under the new land division combination and boundary adjustment ordinance. I've prepared application forms for the types of applications that would be brought forward to the township under that new ordinance quite some time ago, and those were all reviewed and internally approved by the administrator of that ordinance, who is the person who's also serving as your zoning administrator, Josh Mills. But I couldn't actually finalize the new application forms to actually put them in use without having an understanding of what the fee structure was under the various types of applications that ordinance addresses. So that is just a loose end, it's kind of a housekeeping item, but I would appreciate it so you can actually put those forms into use. If the board would circle back to that perhaps at your next meeting and get that input to me. Okay, number, oh, I didn't remember the agenda. Am I addressing that? The continuation of the district? Yeah, I'm covering that now? Okay, so sidebar back on the Weed Special Assessment District. I previously, not too long ago, communicated to the Township Board just a reminder that 2018, I think it's 2018, is the last year of the existing Special Assessment District and the existing Special Assessment and Weed Control Program for Arcadia Lake. And I noted that while action is not needed on an urgent basis, it is not good to just let that slide indefinitely. So what I suggested at the time was that really the decision for the board at this point would be whether or not the board has any interest in initiating a continuation project and an extension of the Special Assessment District upon the lapsing of the existing program by board initiative, or, as was the case with the original program in 2008 and 9, have the interested property owners decide whether they want to initiate. The law gives you either option. My default thinking is that it would be the property owners since they initiated the first time, but that's a board decision whether or not you have support for doing it on your own or deferring to the property owners to initiate the process, which again would be by petition.
Would that be a special meeting, special hearing?
Well, they'll,
Just
if,
contact me.
if the property, yeah, I would, is there a identifiable group?
Yeah.
Kind of ran point on that last time?
I actually spoke with a few members of that group recently. They were actually inquiring on whether we had started working on it again because they were interested in it.
Okay.
They offered to survey Storkey Point and their subdivisions that they live in to gather support for that, and I asked them to go ahead and do that and come back and tell us, yeah, 50 out of 55 people want you. So yes, they're going to initiate it and give us the information.
Board consensus, comfortable with that? Property owners initiating the process if there's to be one. All right, you might communicate to those interested people that my letter to the board, just it's a reminder of where you are in the time frame. Okay, I did that. So they know. But assuming that people get going on things at a reasonable period of time, sometime later this year even, you should be able to hold the required public hearings, there'll be 2 of them, in conjunction with regular board meetings. I wouldn't think you need to have special meetings of the board.
So does this special assessment go through the 2018 winter tax? Will it be on there?
My
And then it must be
recollection
removed
is this is the last,
for 2018.
this is the last year that's been approved
So we have some
for
time.
levy. We have some time. But there was also, and I can't remember your situation compared to the number of others I have going on, they're all seemingly coming up after this year. Whether your assessments were paying the township back from the previous year, or we're working forward for the next year.
Oh,
I think it's
taxes are
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that means that you're always fronting, the township always advancing dollars from the general fund until the special assessments come in or paid. If you're gonna fix that, then 1 year, that'd be 19, or 18, potentially you'd have 2 special assessments. You'd have the one to cover the last year of the current program, and then if you wanted that program to work forward, so revenues are received before the expenditures are needed, you'd have a second hit that year.
And we can discuss that with the property.
It certainly could.
Yeah. I think we'd have to discuss that with the property owners and explain, you know, I mean, we would like to have the funds so then we can pay it instead of paying it and then getting the funds back.
Okay, anything else on that? Okay. This next item is the lawsuit that was referenced previously by a resident, initiated recently by Deborah Eckhout against the township and the other 4 members of the township board individually. This is pending litigation. I don't propose to talk about anything in open session or public session that I shouldn't relative to this pending lawsuit. But here's what I can tell you, and therefore the public in open session, that I think is easily possible. There's the complaint filed in circuit court has three counts. 2 of those are appeals from a FOIA decision, and the 3rd count concerns expenses for which the treasurer claims that she's entitled to be reimbursed. So that's the 3-count complaint in real summary form. As far as what happens next, I can tell you what happened immediately when the action was brought to my attention, which I think was the day that the defendants were served process, which starts a timeline for the township's response, all defendants' response to the complaint. obtained contact information from the township for the township's insurer and requested a determination of the township's insurer as to whether or not the insurer had a duty to provide a defense to the action based on the contract of insurance. And in my experience, those determinations are sometimes not made on a very timely basis relative to the time frame for providing a township answer to the complaint. So I did file on behalf of all defendants to protect the interest of all defendants. I filed an appearance, not an answer. I filed an appearance, entered my appearance on behalf of all the defendants to protect the interest of all defendants, pending a determination by the township's insurer. The township's insurer, fortunately in this case, did make a rather quick determination that they do have a duty to provide defense. I've not seen anything in writing from the insurer in that regard, or from any other legal counsel, but I had a conversation with an individual informing me that there was an appointment of this lawyer's firm to serve as counsel. I inferred that was counsel for all defendants, but I don't know that for a fact. I can tell you what, at least at this point, I think the likely roles are for myself and the other appointed counsel in the case. If the appointed, well, to the extent the appointed counsel is representing all the defendants, my role in the matter going forward should be minimized considerably. And in fact, when the appointed counsel engages into the particulars of the matter, one of the issues that I would most likely discuss is whether I would then remain counsel of record for any of the defendants to assure that I was kept informed of pleadings filed and so on, or is it the type of situation where I could withdraw my appearance? So that's something that I will be considering at the appropriate time when the appointed counsel is a little further down the road with this and we've had a conversation about this.
Craig?
Yes.
Can I ask, who authorized you to file the appearance?
I filed that appearance as legal counsel for the township.
And who authorized that?
I don't know if anybody told me to do it. I did it because I'm legal counsel for the township.
Okay.
We discussed it.
And,
Yeah.
that, by the way, I don't know that nobody didn't tell me to do it, but I don't remember if they did.
I just wondered if there was a board action.
It's my practice when I'm designated as legal counsel for a municipal entity, if there's suit filed, my experience is that my client wants to be sure that their interests are protected, and one way to do that is to make sure that I would be entitled to any subsequent filings by filing my formal appearance in the matter.
I called him.
Okay.
I called him for me.
Okay, so.
Well, and just to be clear, let's cover some of Debbie's questions earlier, because those are fair, legit questions.
Thank you.
So, go ahead.
Okay, just a conflict of interest, you're our attorney, the board's attorney.
Actually, I'm the township's.
The township attorney, right, yeah, sorry. Correct, you are the township attorney, but then you're representing each of them individually?
Here's how I would have to respond to that right now. I did file the appearance on behalf of all defendants.
Okay.
To protect the interests of all defendants, and I will tell you a couple of things that I relied on to do that. One, as counsel for the township, that, to my understanding and experience for many years, it implies, in the absence of a decision or guidance to the contrary, implies that you're also representing the interest of any named individual defendant officials. And I also took into consideration the provision of the township's policy manual concerning indemnification of township officials in the event of civil action filed against individual officers of the township for matters allegedly within their purview as officers of the township, not some personal matter. So, yes, at this point my appearance is on behalf of all named defendants. As I've indicated, that may or may not go away as to any or all of the named defendants, depending on what I hear from appointed counsel, who will take the lead on all aspects of this case.
Gotcha. Okay.
You had some other questions, I think. I don't remember what they were.
From here?
I thought you earlier on.
Okay, you answered that one. Yes. You answered that, conflict of interest, yeah, I think you've got them all, it's just that there was never any board decision to authorize you.
There was not.
Okay.
I will tell you that there's a little statute which often folks don't pay attention to, that actually indicates the supervisor is the legal agent of the township. And I did have communication with the supervisor, and it was my understanding from that conversation that I was expected to assure that the interests of the township were protected while a determination was pending as to any duty of the insurer to provide defense.
But the supervisor cannot just make those decisions on her own, she has to have the backing of the board, and then she can be the representative.
That actually, given the statutory designation as supervisor's legal agent, that might be a debatable point of law, but I don't really care to debate that tonight. I don't think that's necessary or a good use of our time. But the process going forward, just very, very generally, counsel for defendants, whoever that may be, will file on a timely basis, I'm sure, an answer or other appropriate, it's called an initial responsive pleading. An initial responsive pleading could be a motion instead of an answer, but your designated counsel, whoever it may be, will review all the particulars and determine what is the appropriate first action on behalf of the named defendants.
Hey Greg, do you feel that you do have a conflict of interest representing the township and individuals?
On the facts of this complaint, absolutely not.
Okay.
None. Zero. And their interests are precisely aligned, at least it appears to me so at this point, based on the allegations.
And Craig, as a township attorney, you're also my attorney. You know, because of the township.
Actually, I'm not your attorney.
Well, you're the township attorney.
Not in this instance,
and
because you're an adversarial party.
But I'm part of the township.
You are an official of the township, and if you were a named defendant in a case, presumably I would be responding in the same manner in that instance as I am here, on your behalf.
Okay.
But you have legal counsel, you currently retain legal counsel as the plaintiff in the matter, and your interests, obviously by virtue of being the plaintiff, are not aligned with and are manifestly adverse to the interest of the township and the individual named defendants. So I'm not your attorney in this instance, in any way.
You're not township attorney, and I represent the township.
Yes. You hold an office with the township.
So you're suing yourself? This is just confusing to me. You know?
So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the litigation process, but long story short, there may or may not be preliminary motions filed that could knock out, I would expect frankly a likely motion to knock out the individual named defendants. I might think there's a plausible conclusion that the individual named defendants are not necessary to support either of the three counts in this matter. They're not necessary parties, and they were likely included for some other purpose than a necessary purpose. But that's a decision that I will not likely be making as to any of the defendants. So the litigation process then will go on, potentially motions. There may or may not be discovery. At some point, there may or may not be a conversation about, is there a basis for a resolution? Whether it be by, well, any number of avenues that the court rules provide for. And if the matter is not resolved, then of course, the case goes on through other procedures, including potentially a trial. My intent, if I do not withdraw as to all named defendants, is nevertheless to minimize my involvement in this case, because I will not be lead counsel, so far as I'm assuming at this point. And another reason for me to potentially suggest to appointed counsel that I withdraw my appearance is because the subject of the FOIA request, the first two counts, pertains to records that involve attorney-client privilege. So I may or may not be designated as a witness in the case. An attorney can be a witness in the same case, by the way, a court rule on this, in which he's serving as counsel. But these are all the types of things that I'll be discussing with the appointed counsel. And we'll proceed accordingly. I want to hand something out to you, and I want to use it as a point of some discussion. I just prepared this morning, just finished it before I left. That's the original for the clerk, please. And then 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you.
So let me preface this before I do what I hope to do, which is talk about this. Why'd I do this? This township, with respect to financial governance, has not been functioning in a normal manner for months.
Years.
Many months. And I'm not trying to make this personal. This is about the process. This is about the procedures. This is about the practices. This is about ultimately the law. It doesn't seem that can or should go on. I would think there'd be a consensus or unanimity of support for that idea, that this cannot go on. Is that a reasonable assumption for me to make?
Absolutely.
So we have to find appropriate ways to address these issues that sometimes involve irregularities of procedures and practices, that sometimes involve, I think, misunderstandings of what certain responsibilities and duties of an official or the board itself entail. So I decided, you know what, let's kind of start from scratch here. Let's do kind of a township financial governance, maybe not 101, but 1 class, and spell out some of the basics in what I hope is a crystal clear way. So what I'd like to do is just run down through these bullet points, and I'll perhaps have some annotation on some of them. All right, so I split this up into several logical segments. This is by no means an exhaustive examination of all the laws that might pertain to these topics, but it does hit the primary statutes and other governing legal resources that apply to these subjects. The first topic is authorization for expenditure of township funds. This is easy stuff. The township board has the exclusive authority to approve expenditures of township funds. No expenditure or the incurrence of a township debt or liability is lawful without township board approval. That's not news to any of you, right? Next bullet, where a payment authorized by the township board is to be made by check, the check is prepared by the township clerk, and everybody up here knows that that's referred to generally as a warrant, and is required to be signed by the township clerk, except checks drawn on the property tax collection account. Next bullet, expenditures and payments by check that are authorized by the township board, and therefore lawful order of the board, and that are signed by the township clerk, are paid by the treasurer. And by the way, when I use these terms, clerk or treasurer, the footnotes just indicate that that could connote the deputy of either official in the applicable circumstances. The disbursement procedure used by the township, which is unquestionably a best practice endorsed by the Accounting Procedures Manual of the Michigan Department of Treasury, also requires the signature of the treasurer on a check for any disbursement approved by order of the township board. So any check that's been put out there at any time by any officials of this township that were not signed by the clerk or deputy clerk and the treasurer or deputy treasurer would not be a valid instrument of payment under township law. And that comment is going to provide a jumping off point for some outside issues here, I think. The requirement for dual signatures on all checks to make the check a lawful instrument of payment under township law is not always properly understood and or properly administered and enforced by financial institutions, and may not well synchronize with bank policies and procedures. This dual signature requirement for checks may especially be a source of misunderstanding with respect to which official or officials permissibly has access to funds in a bank account as compared to which official or officials permissibly has access to account records. Based on conversations with particularly administrators of one bank used by this township, I can tell you that there is in fact a disconnect between these two concepts, bank policies and township law. And the source of that disconnect is, when I try to wheedle my way through the weeds here and get to the heart of the matter, as it has been a problem here with this board, is sometimes terminology. Bank terminology, and this is sometimes a potato-potato situation. When the term on the account cards, on the signature cards, is used by a bank in the absence of a restrictive resolution, which we'll get to the bank, to them, that means that the individuals on the account, put that phrase in your head, on the account, have access not merely to the account records, but to the funds. That's a problem. Because we have this situation where township law requires the clerk and the treasurer to be on the check. They have to be the signers of the check to make it a valid check to pay a bill. But while both the clerk and the treasurer appropriately and necessarily have access to bank records, only the treasurer has access to the funds, to the money. And I know that you've had, from conversation I had with some of these folks, you've had this ongoing situation where there have been different account cards prepared and submit it, and somebody would sign off, somebody wouldn't sign off, and if there's another go-around, and somebody would sign off, and somebody would not sign off. And I think the source of that is precisely this disconnect. This is not a problem for 99.9999% of the townships in the state of Michigan, at least to my knowledge. Because A, the clerks understand they do not have access to the money, and B, the clerk and the treasurer are playing nice together. Your clerk and treasurer, and not just the current occupant of the clerk's office, have not been playing nice together. So we have this thing that's festered. What I'm trying to focus my attention on this week is how can I constructively suggest the township move forward to get past these log jams. I'll come to that. But I think, when I tell you that part of the issue is, I think a big part of the issue is this disconnect, does that resonate with the treasurer and the clerk as explaining some things?
There can't be two managers of the money. The treasurer's the only one that can manage.
The clerk does have to sign a warrant, but her signature should never be honored by the bank. And
Her signature on what?
On the anything at the bank. She can't. A check can't be cashed with just her signature. Or
Correct.
Check can't go and
Or just the
transfer
treasurer
money
and deputy treasurer's signature. Not a valid instrument
on
under
a check.
township law.
On a check.
On a check.
Exactly.
I'm working on a way around some of this, but bear with me.
You're gonna be lawful.
I may not be able to get there all tonight, but I can at least lay some thoughts out. Okay, so the next bullet, the clerk is, as you all know, is responsible for the detailed accounting records of the township, including the preparation and maintenance of journals and ledgers necessary to reflect the assets, liabilities, fund equities, revenues, and expenditures for each fund of the township using what's called the Uniform Chart of Accounts. It's prescribed by the state treasurer for this level of municipal entity. The treasurer receives and takes charge of money received by the township or otherwise paid into the township treasury, including property tax collections. All good so far, right? With that? The treasurer is also required to keep some accounting records, to keep an accurate account of all township receipts and expenditures, and that can be in a paper book or by electronic means, which meets the uniform accounting requirements of the state treasurer. Next bullet. And by the way, if one thing folks could do at some point is highlight in all these bullets the words township board or clerk or treasurer, because the gist of this is to try to put in a succinct, simple form who does what, who has what authority and or duty. The township board, the last bullet in this segment, the township board has exclusive authority to establish a uniform chart of accounts and reports for use by the treasurer and the clerk, and provide annual financial reports and audits in accordance with the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. And you've heard about some of that tonight in the audits. Comment. The timely and proper performance of the duties of the clerk pertinent to the financial governance of the township requires timely access to the core records of the treasurer, including deposit records and bank account statements. In a properly functioning township, the treasurer routinely and regularly shares all such records with the clerk. Where this does not occur, the statutorily intended checks and balances relationship between the offices of the clerk and treasurer cannot be achieved, and neither the township board nor the public can be assured of the security of township funds. You just spent a lot of money on forensic accounting services reflective of that issue right there.
Let's agree that situation is exasperated by two different sets of books.
Well, it's exasperated by a lot of things. some of which may involve procedures, some of which may involve other factors. And keep in mind, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an auditor, I'm just reflecting on the principles of law that pertain to some of those activities. Second part, designation of depositories for all township funds and related matters. There's some nuggets in here that I want the board to very carefully pay attention to because most of this relates to the township board. The township board has the exclusive authority and duty to determine with specificity the financial institutions, one or more, where all public monies that come into the hands of the treasurer shall be deposited, including property tax collections. Only the board has that authority. You decide what banks are depositories for any township funds. Next bullet, the township board may limit the amount of money to be deposited into any one depository. Board decision, no one else's. The treasurer is required to deposit money in the financial institution as directed by the township board. Next bullet, the township board has the authority and the duty to determine the time for which all deposits shall be made. We just had a discussion about some of that in the context of marina cash deposits. Board policy is daily. That's a lawful and permissible policy. Next bullet, the township board has the authority and indeed the duty to determine all details for carrying into effect the authority given to the treasurer, the clerk, or the township board with respect to the depositing of money as directed by the township board. That means, all of this so far means, that you have considerable authority to micromanage, if you think it's necessary, many of these issues that relate to township depositories and the depositing of funds. Next bullet, the township board has exclusive authority to determine the types of accounts and investments in which the treasurer may invest any township funds. Board decision, not the treasurer's, not the clerk's. Next bullet, township board has the authority, exclusive authority and duty to determine the type of accounts and investments in which the treasurer may invest any township funds. You can, for example, say, direct the treasurer, and by the way, most of these actions are in the form of board resolution, the statute requires. You can literally determine that, treasurer, all our money is going into savings account at Acme Bank, except for the checking account that's needed to cut checks. And that'll be at Ajax Bank. You have the authority to determine whether specific funds are held at Bank A, B, or C, and in what form of account. That's a board decision. You can direct the treasurer accordingly. And the last bullet on this point is relating to investment policy. It's related to the previous bullet, but a little different. The township board has the exclusive authority and a duty to, and by the way, the statute says in consultation with the treasurer, to adopt an investment policy that includes various required parameters, all of which are binding on the treasurer. The point that I hope you get out of that is that it may be appropriate for the board to reconsider the specificity that's needed with respect to not only the depositories, but also the deposits, consistent with your authority, and in most instances, your duty. Again, most townships, not a problem. It's a problem. And I don't really care, honestly, why, other than what's the prudent and potentially acceptable and lawful ways to fix the problem. Next segment, public access to financial documents. had some issues with public official access to documents, much less access, and I'm not suggesting that street necessarily ran exclusively one way. First bullet, any document prepared, used by, or in the possession of, or retained by the treasurer in the performance of an official function is a public record. Any. All. Next bullet, all proceedings in connection with the treasurer's deposit of money are required to be conducted in a manner to ensure full publicity, and such records are required to be open at all times to public inspection. Now, I did add a parenthetical, subject to redaction of such information as bank account numbers. You're not required to disclose those under FOIA, and it'd be dumb to do that. Last bullet in that part, all financial records of the township, whether maintained by the treasurer, the clerk, or otherwise, are available to the public in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and other applicable laws, again, subject to appropriate and permissible redactions. You've had some issues with sharing of records. No official of this township should have to file a FOIA request to get access to the core financial records of any other office, particularly when it comes to clerk and the treasurer. And there shouldn't be game playing by either of those officials, whoever the occupant of the office may be at any given time. Shouldn't be game playing and withholding of records. These two offices have to work together. They have to. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to be in the same damn room. But you have to work together and share. The records that are required by law to be available to the public, sure as heck ought to be available to the appropriate primary officials of the township.
Well,
And I'm not, this is not meant to be accusatory.
I know, but what documents are you talking about?
Oh my God, from what's been communicated to me at least.
But not by me.
Well, to some extent by you. There's been an issue, it's an ongoing issue, with either the sharing of records or the timeliness of access to records in such a manner as to affect the ability of one official or the other, sometimes perhaps more than one, to carry out a core statutory duty. That has to stop.
Okay, what documents are we talking about?
I can't believe that we even have to.
I have bank statements and cash receipt, which she gets.
The auditor just had to subpoena records from the bank because you wouldn't give them up. How can you not know what we're talking about?
He got everything from me and asked.
Gabriel just came down here and brought records that you supplied to them that I asked you for in emails more than 3 times. And then, after he walked out the door, you tried to take them from me, and I had to take them physically back from you. They're in your home, they're not in the office. I can't go to your house and say, hey, can I see receipt number 459?
You have 459.
Okay, so
you have all the originals, right?
Now I do because Gabriel drove down here on Monday to give them to me.
That's the book with the carbon copies. You have the originals.
I have the originals, yes.
it hasn't, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to suggest that the process hasn't worked the way it should, or these people wouldn't even be sitting here.
That's right. Yep.
So something about the process is not working properly or even adequately. That needs to change.
Then Patty and I should get together and work it out.
Oh, my.
Let me move on to the last segment.
Yeah, please.
Consequences of failure to perform statutory duties pertaining to financial governance. And this may sound harsh to some folks, but I'm just spelling out the law. And we'll talk about what, of course, may be more prudent than others when we get through this. Maybe tonight, maybe not tonight. First bullet, the treasurer's failure to comply with township board directives regarding deposits causes the treasurer and the treasurer's sureties to be liable for any loss occasioned by such failure. That's a potentially serious problem, I would think. for the treasurer and the treasurer's sureties. Second bullet, any false statement relating to the finances, funds, monies, or balances in any fund of the township knowingly delivered, published, or given out by the treasurer or any other officer or employee of the township is a misdemeanor criminal offense, subject to 90 days in the Hooskow and a $500 fine for each offense charged and convicted. The next one's a duty. Any willful neglect by the treasurer or other officer of the township to perform a duty of office prescribed by law constitutes a criminal misdemeanor offense, and this is what's called a high misdemeanor, 1 year in the pokey and a $1,000 fine for each offense charged and convicted. Last bullet. The existence of criminal penalties for offenses pertaining to the financial governance of the township does not in any way affect the legal authority of the township to pursue a civil lawsuit against an officer of the township seeking appropriate remedies. And by the way, for each and every one of these bullets, this synopsis includes statutory citations. And in many instances, the verbiage is very close to verbatim, if not paraphrased from the statute. So, things can, I've suggested this board has a fundamental choice to make. Do you wish to provide an opportunity for all of these past problems to be resolved by internal communication at this point? Do you wish to allow these issues to be potentially resolved by the electorate through the political remedy, which I understand the electorate's already in the process of exercising as to multiple members of this board, or
Which is a recall.
a recall. Yep, sorry, I didn't mean to speak in code there. Or does this board feel it's prudent or necessary to take some form of action that would be available by law to this board to pursue, per those statutory provisions, either potential criminal repercussions or civil remedies, or both? And if you choose to pursue criminal charges, keep in mind, please, the purpose of a criminal prosecution is primarily punishment. It isn't necessarily oriented towards remedial action. The idea behind the punishment is to conform behavior, of course, but I've prosecuted any number of people, and I can tell you that the prosecution and conviction doesn't necessarily conform their behavior. So that is a drawback, if you will, a downside of a criminal prosecution route. The potential for civil action, civil remedies, the upside would be, that's the essence of civil action, is to seek remedial relief. Change by court order, edict. Do it this way, or you're going to answer to the person in the road for contempt of court and be subject to incarceration for contempt. The obvious problem with that approach is, at least I think it's a problem, is the amount of money that you're presently spending on legal counsel to engage in various issues, many of them which we've talked about tonight, will not decrease, it'll increase. You will spend a lot of money on a civil action. Your indemnification policy may be such that the township would not only be, you'd be required to, of course, pay for the counsel for the plaintiff township, but the an official named as a defendant in a civil action may have an opportunity to have counsel provided by the township through its insurer. Depending on the nature of the allegations, there may or may not be. Insurer provide legal defense to an official. But the township will spend, there's no way to estimate. But trust me, it'll be a lot in legal fees. You will likely have some remedial outcome, but it will not be immediate. And as with any legal action, no result is certain. So, I know that there are members of this board that are probably 4 of you, probably 5 of you, that are pretty tired of how things have been going. I understand that there are probably multiple members of the board who are ready to say, thermonuclear war, it's time. We're tired of screwing around with this crap, tired of dealing with this. There's differences of opinion on who's right, who's wrong. Let's just fire away and have it out. I'm here to suggest to you that while that's a legally permissible option, the board seems to me would be prudent to discuss whether all other options have been exhausted before you would engage in this interofficial warfare in a court.
What I would like to do is just fix the general ledger. Unfortunately, I only have access to 4 accounts records at one bank. I don't know, I can't feasibly do it. I have help, I don't have the time, but we will make the time to do it.
All right.
But
now, you said access to, what? Access to the records?
the records, I don't need access to the money, but I need to see the transactions because what has been coming down is not sufficient to categorize it within the uniform chart system.
Absolutely.
So, if I can go onto the website and look at the transaction, that's fine. But when $50,000 appears in the general fund and I have no idea where it came from, what am I gonna do with that? When I get a receipt in January from October,
Yeah, there's 2 issues
you
there.
know,
There's not
I
timely.
have to be able to go on the bank, see what's happening, and put it in the ledger. That's all I want.
Or you have to have the records provided to you in a timely manner.
Statements are not in enough detail,
I understand that.
What else do you want?
so
Statements aren't enough, what else do you want?
the receipts have to be detailed enough. My question is, can the treasurer unilaterally just close an account and open another one?
Depends on the authorizing resolution of the board relating to the
There's no resolution. I just found out about it today.
Then I believe that, doing
But
this
it
off
was
the
done
cuff,
in
but I believe that'd be a no.
Well,
Now,
Okay.
wait, you mean, we're talking about tax accounts?
No, you closed a checking account at West Shore in September, 2 of them, and moved them to new checking accounts
Oh,
for
that's-
better interest, and I understand that that's a good move, but my question is that stuff has to be discussed with us and decided. You cannot just
Well, wait,
move money.
that was, I didn't move money, what was it called, West Michigan National Bank sold to West Shore Bank?
Not in September.
No, but those monies had to be moved into a new money market from the old bank. And we were waiting for Patrice to go sign the signature cards, but she never did. And then finally, when you came on and signed, that's when they were able to do it. It was an old money market that
That's
didn't.
not what they told me today, so.
Okay.
So, I'm telling you, and then, well, since I've been clerk, there's been numerous accounts closed, moved, CDs cashed out.
Right.
I've I didn't know, but I called Huntington Bank because we got an interest statement, and they said, oh, that's from a closed CD. I have no record of the CD being closed or even open or where the money went.
You should have a receipt, yeah, you got it.
Well, I probably do now in the piles that I have to go through.
Because the records have not been shared as they should be on a routine, timely basis, what I've been thinking about
Craig, I
is,
have to interject.
Go ahead.
The records, we're talking about bank statements?
we're talking about all the pertinent financial records that are part of the office of the treasurer and the clerk.
Okay, so I don't have that many. I have bank
But yes,
statements, I have
You
receipts.
have receipts, you have deposit slips, you may have transfer slips, you may have whatever it is.
Right.
It's not a secret.
No.
They're not your accounts.
No, and I give the clerk everything.
Well, that's not what I'm
I know
hearing
that's not
here
what
and
you're
here.
hearing, I know, but I
Are these
have.
people making this
And
stuff
my
up?
deputy has been, can I talk?
Well, but I'm just
No,
saying,
can I talk?
they
I've got
have
to.
to get a.
They did not have to get anything. They could have gotten it from me. I gave Carl everything in his CD or in his emails that he asked me for. My records are no secret. They're not interesting. They're bank statements. I have lots of emails from Carl. I gave him everything. And I asked, is this what you want? If it's not, let me know. And I have emails from him saying, thank you, got it, thank you for cooperating. Bank statements, Patty, you have them online at West Shore Bank. I provide state savings to you.
I have bank statements online
From
from West Shore
Shore
Bank
Bank.
for 2 accounts
And
and
the-
2 savings accounts, which do not even give me transactions.
They come in the
I cannot
mail.
even look in the
I can't
transactions.
either. They come in the mail. I don't see them online either.
You can look at them,
He said she.
They come in the mail.
so,
They come in the mail, Patty. You open the mail.
I'm not talking about bank statements, I'm talking about line items, so, I'm not gonna get into.
Okay, but if you want to sit down and tell me what you want me to do, we can sit down and meet. I've asked you a couple times to meet.
And I did ask you, and this is the last thing I'm saying about this. I gave you back every receipt you gave
Right.
me, and I told you what I needed back from you.
Yes.
That never happened.
What happened to them?
No, I asked you that, I told you that I needed
The fund numbers.
the fund numbers and the correct breakdowns of where the money, I can't just, because you say handwritten that it comes to fund whatever.
Yeah.
I have to have evidence that that's in fact what it is. It's just like when I give you a bill, I give you the original bill, a copy, I clip the check to it, and I give you every bit of information. You have access to everything. Why can I not have access to every aspect of the,
Patty?
it's just like the $150, that is now in the Marina account and was used for transactions, and I have no way of
All
tracking
right,
it.
Patty, do you think it would be prudent for you and I to just sit down for an hour or so and talk about what we need to do for each other?
Okay, wait a minute, no, let me say,
I'm past that point right now.
can I speak to that,
They
please?
tried with your deputy, Deborah, they tried. And
You know, we're paying for the lawyer, maybe we should listen to what he has to say.
Just a handful of meetings I've been to. With all due respect, I've seen this movie before. The treasurer sits at that scene at the end of the table and makes representations and statements that sound very good and compelling about, oh, of course I'll get you that. Access to that, that's no problem, I'll provide that, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not trying to be dismissive here, but I've heard that before, and then I've also witnessed, after this very same meeting, with words that I'm not going to use, an indication that, yeah, that ain't going to happen.
From who?
From you.
From me?
And I've personally become aware of, and don't do the poor Debbie thing, please. Stop that. Because we that movie too. And no, I'm trying desperately to not make this about individuals and personalities. I'm trying to make this about the duties of the office under the law.
Exactly.
Resign.
That's her prerogative, or the electors.
No, it's just,
It's not this board's prerogative. So here's what I've been
That's right.
thinking about the last couple days at least. what can I suggest to this board, which includes Debbie, that would be in the nature of what I'm calling a workaround? If, no matter what is said at the end of that table from time to time, if the records that are needed for the clerk and the treasurer's offices to function properly are not being shared properly and timely, what options might the township have to do a workaround, the normal procedure that works in pretty much every darn township without controversy? What's out there? What can we do? And I'm developing some ideas. And some of those ideas are in coordination with at least one of your financial institutions that you've designated. A couple of them wouldn't talk to me, and I did understand that. But one of them did, and it was a great conversation, and it was all focused on how do we make this better. And we talked about this disconnect between township law and bank policies, and we talked about how we can remedy that disconnect in a practical way that satisfies both the township legal requirements and the banking policies. And I've just got something right before I left, and I haven't looked at it yet, but I think there's an opportunity. It'll require the board being detailed in its depository resolution. And it will require some details in board guidance to the financial institution about access to make clear that a person who is on the account for check signing purposes isn't necessarily a person who has access to the money. And I think from at least the conversation with at least the one bank who would talk to me, I think there's some potential to make that happen. That would provide access to the bank records to the clerk on a monthly basis. At that point. And frankly, if there's bank, I understand you got FDIC insurance limit issues and so on, but if there's a bank you're currently dealing with who will not understand and respond properly to this disconnect and help this township work through that, then perhaps that bank shouldn't be one of your approved depositories.
So why do we have this disconnect and nobody else does? And this does not originate with me because the books weren't done when I came to town. When I stepped into this position, we were already in this mess.
We did these bullet points about a year ago.
Thank you. Same thing, different day. And my problem is number one, I do not want to spend township money anymore on legal stuff. I don't want to have to pay a CPA to do simple accounting that I'm perfectly capable of doing. I've been doing for over 30 years. Not fund accounting, but it's not brain surgery. But I am darn tired of the game playing, the suing, the FOIA, and I am really tired of it. And man, you want to say something to me, then open the book and the picture.
I am too. I
So,
think
you
this
know.
is a witch hunt. This whole thing, they're all arguing amongst each other.
No.
and
Yeah.
having law. I
No.
see them never working together.
Open it up.
All right, stop.
You
I'm
want
not
my
confident
opinion, I
that
gave
there is
you
any.
Thank
my
you
very
very
best.
much.
I have more.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the bottom line issues here is our policy is to use a single book system. You use QuickBooks, Debbie has her own separate. How are we supposed to keep track of everything with two separate sets of books?
I was told by Cambridge I cannot do that.
No, we can't do that. My question is, how do we compel the treasurer to use the approved accounting system? And then these records all there, and you can do your job. You can pay the fuel taxes because the treasurer has entered the sales data into the same system that everyone else is using.
But we tried that, when was it?
That's my point.
We've been trying
Our
to.
policy
We made
is,
motions to do it, it's not been in compliance, and it's just,
how do we
it
compel?
just goes on and on and on.
Do you have,
The deposit structure has been in the policy manual since at least March of 2017, and it's not been followed.
okay,
once.
do the other members of the board have an understanding from Debbie as to why she has not used that system?
The state requires the clerk to enter the deposits, the treasurer can't.
Okay, that wasn't the question.
That's not the
I thought it was
question.
about
The question is, why aren't you using QuickBooks and why are you keeping your own set of books? We were in a meeting here a year ago where you agreed to take classes and go into QuickBooks.
I have
And
QuickBooks.
use it back here. We had your computer set up.
What am I supposed to use it for?
The treasurer is required to enter the daily sales receipts
No,
from the
no. I know the board made that policy, but that you can't require me to do something that's not my statutory duty. And I'm not gonna do it.
July 31st, the state deposit system changed. It was known
Right.
as the Contracted Payment Express.
Right,
You were supposed to go and upgrade the information. That didn't happen,
No.
so all of our deposits are going to the wrong accounts. Therefore, we have to
I'm
write
not
a check
required to
and
do that. I
transfer.
can't do that, Greg.
Excuse
The
me,
state
I'm
requires
not-
the clerk to record the deposits.
But you are the one that had access to the system. You didn't provide access to the clerk, so the clerk could do it.
Access to what? To QuickBooks?
No.
State of Michigan.
Okay.
payment.
Oh, Sigma. Oh, okay, sorry.
On July 31st, the state deposit system, known as Contracted Payment Express, was changed.
Yeah,
You were the only one that had access to the system. You were required to update it when it changed,
Right.
so our deposits went to the right bank account.
it can only go to one bank account.
That is not correct.
That is correct. That's what they told me. If you have one address, you can only have one bank account.
The Marina account has a different address, and all the state of Michigan payments from the state park system used to go right into that account. The other monies, such as grant money and tax refunds, go into the general checking account.
Right.
Those no longer happen because you didn't do that, and
I
that
did
is
do that.
why we have to write a check from one account to the other, because the deposits are going in the wrong spot.
The state of Michigan marina stuff is not going into the marina
Right,
account.
right.
You're-
I already talked to them about
It's
that.
going into a separate account and you're transferring it.
Are we getting anywhere?
So why was I the only one that was out of order, when everyone in the gallery is, I'm the only one that really individually got gavelled down?
I gavelled a couple of people, sir, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Point of order.
Patty, if you want to get together and work this out, sit down at your office, I'm willing to do that. We're getting nowhere. This is not going anywhere. And I have asked you a couple times.
You give a,
He gave a big check. Are you,
You want to work with the clerk, why does your office not move back to the office? How do you work with the clerk when your office is?
I can come in and sit down at her desk.
no, we have a desk for you, we created a space for you.
Debbie, I wish you'd stay.
No, I can't.
Please sit
Yes, you
down.
can.
Nowhere. It's 10 o'clock, these people are getting angry and they're taking it out on me.
I wish you
And
would
I'm
stay.
done.
You
Everybody resign.
should stay for the rest of this meeting.
Please stay for the rest of your meeting, Deborah.
But I said, I'm with my lawyer.
Please come back and sit down.
this is like sixth grade.
Go sit down and let's finish it. The public wants you to. Yes, please come and sit down.
I'm not answering.
You don't have to answer any more questions.
Other than potentially a judge in court orders. That's a shame if you should have to go that route.
Exactly.
But we've all kind of had this conversation in one level or another, in one way or another, and doesn't seem to resolve anything. So either the members of this board make a commitment, a genuine and sincere and complete commitment to work together to resolve all these issues internally, or I don't see that you have any practical recourse but to seek outside assistance by someone who can compel actions, unless you're willing to leave this to the electorate and see what happens.
I'm not making a decision tonight.
And I'm not suggesting you ought to make that decision tonight.
I think we can.
I would like to hear what our options are as far as compelling compliance. We've been having the same conversation for over a year, and we hear the same thing. I'm gonna try. It doesn't happen. We need to know what our options are to compel compliance with our accepted rules.
All right. So, and that applies to everybody, right?
Yes.
So, putting the focus on civil action, your focus is conforming. Well, ultimately, you're talking about, I think, the intervention of a court, civil action, and that has to be based on specific facts that then translate to the legal action that you're requesting the court approve, which could be, I think I spoke to this a little bit on the 26th, the special meeting. The circuit court has an opportunity to appoint what's called a special master. I think I shared with the board that I served as a special master, appointed by a circuit court in another county just a handful of years ago, involving a treasurer that was not conforming to the law. And the issue in that matter was mostly about the tax collections account, but there were other issues too. Some similarities to this situation. And if the court appoints a special master and provides the authority to the special master can literally issue orders backed by the authority of the court, directing in detail who does what and how you do it and when you do it.
Great.
And if it's not done that way, you're standing before somebody wearing a robe.
Great. Sounds good.
So that's one remedy, if a circuit judge will appoint a special master. If a judge does not appoint a special master, then you'd be relegated to other forms of relief that would take place after the case is litigated. If you're successful with the claims, where you'd ask the court to issue orders enjoining certain actions, compelling certain actions, mandating certain actions at the appropriate times and by the appropriate people. That's not likely to happen on an overnight basis.
So we've already initiated with the sheriff's department.
That's a criminal prosecution route,
Right.
which I was not speaking to because...
No, but I'm just saying, so we've got those issues that we have put forth with the detective. They're aware that Carl, explain again how you got the records that you required with the search warrant.
Well, I didn't issue the search warrant.
I know you didn't.
There was already a incident report on file.
Yes.
Prior to my engagement with the county sheriff's department.
Correct.
And as a result of my engagement to acquire records from the marina, which I did not have with deposit slips. The issue really was the deposit slips that we could rely on. I asked the assistance for those specific records from the detective, And he provided the records that I needed, that I did not have, and that was enabled me then to wrap up the case.
Carl, you got the originals from me, didn't you?
I can't really comment on at this point what you gave me, because there were various records you did give me. We looked at some of them, but I relied on what the detective and actually the bank provided with a stamp on it.
Okay.
The date, the amount, and the full names. So that was what I relied on.
Because at the special meeting, you did state, when I read the request that you had asked for, you stated that, no, you had not received the completed request that you had requested, the records that you had requested. Am I correct in that statement?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
And then on the
So are we gonna
30th,
discuss this now, or are we gonna table it?
and then on the 30th, 31st, which was after the meeting, I received the records.
Were you supplied with some documents that you were unable to use for one reason or another?
I was supplied with what I call incomplete documents, and so I said, let me go right, cut the time down on this and go forward.
And that's why you had to go directly to the banks?
Through the
Through
detective.
the detective, correct, yes. All right. We can, let's table this, it doesn't have to be done tonight, we can table that, we're not gonna, let's table our holiday decoration.
One thing.
Yes, Carl. We've got a month or two. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, this was follow-up to when I gave my preliminary report.
Correct.
As it's my understanding right now, the property tax payments that have been mailed out, not the payments, but the tax bills, at my understanding, the funds are being paid and being sent to the treasurer's home address.
Correct.
Some.
No, they aren't.
Some are. Some people wouldn't mail to the home address, and so.
What I'm getting at, I think we should update our insurance policy to include that as a cash receiving position.
Because that's a liability.
Yes, in other words, if something were to happen, get the insurance covered for a minor amount. Yes.
Well, we have to agree to it because we can't leave the township at risk because of, that, so we have to.
So did that, when they went to Eugene Bishop's house, was that an issue then?
I have no idea. Wasn't here.
I wasn't even involved back then.
And see, therein lies the
But our
problem
policy
is
says.
policies and laws change, Debbie, and you can't keep saying, well, so-and-so did that.
Two different
so-and-so
points,
did that.
because the board knows that there are different legal opinions out there as to the authority of the treasurer unilaterally to determine where mailed property tax payments should be made. You're aware that there's a different opinion. You've got mine, you know that there's another opinion out there.
Right.
At least presently. So, unless you want to litigate that, that's not the issue. I do think that this is a prudent recommendation, and I suggest that you act on that by having a conversation with the insurer to determine that per this recommendation, first of all, does that resonate with the insurer as being a prudent additional risk? And if so, what kind of additional liability protection might you be looking at, and at what cost? And then that information can come back to the board for consideration. Keeping in mind that by the time the board meets again, the tax collection season will be, for winners, will be completed. Yeah.
We can call tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. So what's the pleasure of the board? What do we move forward with? Craig, do you have anything else?
I need you to come back to the pool FOIA appeal. I need action, I need a decision on my recommendation tonight.
Okay.
And again, I don't need to go into closed session unless the board wants to discuss that recommendation.
would like to close for that discussion.
Yeah, me as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that we should think about having another special meeting next week after we've had time to digest and think about what has happened and what was discussed tonight. We have a history of statements made that I will do something and then they haven't been done. We need to determine a way to compel compliance and determine whether we accept that, or if we move a parallel track of assuming compliance but prepare for non-compliance. And I don't think that's anything we can decide tonight. We need to think about that.
And with the possibility, and I can provide more information on this after I digest this better myself, consider whether or not, the extent to which there's an opportunity for some workarounds, as I'm calling them, and whether those might be suitable to address at least some of the issues where the normal procedures are not being followed.
Yes, I would like you to send us that summary, and
I'll tell you what I have in mind once I figure out my thinking on what I have in mind.
So what's the motion we need to deal with right now? We're gonna go to closed session?
If you're otherwise
All right.
ready to do that,
as far as the other stuff, we just decide on a special meeting, and we need time to digest this and
Yeah.
for the.
All right, so let's, look at dates.
Wait from today.
Deborah, what dates would be good? Are you good for a week from today? Deborah, are you good for a week from today? What date is that?
15.
That's, yeah,
Next Thursday.
next Thursday, February 15th. What is a good time for everyone? I don't want to do it late at night. If we could
3
do it-
o'clock in the afternoon.
3 o'clock is really good for me. Is it good for you next Thursday, Patty?
Works for me, yeah.
I can do 3.
3 o'clock? Does that work for you? All right, so we will public notice a special meeting for the 15th of February at 3 p.m. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board at this time? All right, public comment. Would anyone like to make a public comment before? Step up to the microphone, go ahead. Yeah.
Address this. Very good hands.
Okay. Also, there was a question of a safety deposit box. Anybody heard anything about the safety deposit box?
It was brought up at the last meeting, and I have to defer to the clerk or the supervisor.
Deborah is the only one that has access to that safety deposit box, and we are unaware of what's in the box.
Shouldn't
I don't know
that,
where Deborah went. Oh,
shouldn't that be in more than one name
Yes.
if we have a safety deposit box?
yes, it is.
Okay.
Deborah, they're asking about the safety deposit box. It's only in your name that you have the key for.
Clerk had a key, and I had a key. Patrice had a key.
What's the first I've heard of it? I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't know. Yeah.
Patrice told me she didn't know, but I'm just here.
No, she had a key, I had a key.
Okay, well, that's another thing that needs to be
And
addressed.
then they wanted to know about the accounts that we received, interest payments on that,
I have no idea.
we didn't know about.
What, may I ask, may I ask a question? What's the safety deposit box for?
CD.
Well, it's in a bank.
It's at that bush man.
So the actual pieces of paper that are
Right.
CDs.
Okay. I don't want to eat up my 3 minutes here
Go ahead.
with the board's discussion. Also, Debbie, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. You have missed several meetings. You missed last month's meeting, you missed a special meeting.
I missed 2 special meetings. I didn't miss last month's regular meeting.
Oh, I beg to differ. You were not. Oh, I'm sorry. You were here. And at that meeting, you were told that Carl needed the accounts from the marina. You agreed that night to meet at 3 o'clock the following day with Greg and Mike to give those receipts to them. What was the result of that?
I left them in the,
She didn't show up.
no,
You
I
didn't
left,
show
I
up.
left the records here.
I'm sorry, Debbie, you did not
No,
leave.
I couldn't be here, but I left the records, right? You guys got them, didn't you?
There were a few yellow slips that were
Right.
left back there with no note or anything, so we boxed them up, or and stuck them in an envelope and sent them to the
Okay,
auditor,
that's-
but we didn't know what that was. You
That's
didn't
what
leave
you
a
asked
note.
for. That's what you asked for.
Wasn't
What did you ask for?
Anyways, go ahead.
Again, Debbie, you made promises at that meeting.
Yes, and I couldn't be here. I had to take my husband to the doctor, Bonnie.
You always seem to have some reason why you can't be here. Nonetheless, it was good for you to be here tonight so that you could get your input on things. Unbelievable is all I have to say. Unbelievable. Debbie, you have cost this township so much money since you've taken office. You filed unsubstantiated reports against another member of the board, which cost this township in excess of $10,000. When that case was closed, you didn't even bother telling anybody that the case was
It's
closed.
not closed.
It is. We received
It is closed, Debbie, give it up.
Prosecuting.
Now you're threatening lawsuits and so on against, for what? You have not cooperated with this board. You've made all kinds of promises that you would do things that you have not followed through with. Patty, tonight you asked about a login thing for the computer. That is for Quicken?
It gets you onto the computer, but then I can open QuickBooks and work in the QuickBooks remotely.
And did I hear you say that it was a dual?
Yeah, I'm going to have help. We're going to try and bring the general ledger up. So I've got actually some help that are gonna help me do it.
Would that system be accessed to Debbie?
Debbie had remote access she had set up. I suggested logging me into her but now she got her own, I don't know.
The question was, can I
One
have
potential.
access?
Not at this point, because I needed to fix the ledger.
Yeah, Debbie?
We have to go, by March, we have to have a general ledger so we can do a budget. So I got 2 logins because all the accounts have to be brought up. So I have to, right now, she doesn't enter in QuickBooks, she enters in her own QuickBooks. So at this point, this is my workaround. I'm going to reconcile as best as I can with whatever records I can get with whatever help I can. So I got 2 access points so that when I can't be working, other people can be.
I think the answer to your question is potentially yes. Debbie and can both use this software to dial into our computer.
Thank you for
It's
clarifying.
costly, so I would not suggest keeping it indefinitely.
And another question is, are we now, once we get these accounts balanced, or whatever, I don't know the correct term, Debbie, are you going to finally comply with the board's request, which you promised back in
May.
In May? At your very first meeting, Janice.
Oh, back in March, yes.
Okay, in March, you agreed that you would have your office here at the Township Hall, which has been provided for you and you do not use. It's time for you to move your butt into that office, get on Quickens, and get our balances done, our audits.
Concluded that the $150 was not material. It also concluded there was no fraud. It also concluded that the cause for several issues is unclear. So I'll just leave that issue. Now we'll move on to the fact that Mr. Roll is the township's attorney, which means he represents the entire board, not individual members. I'll go back to the language I read previously.
Heard it.
Well, we're gonna hear it again. I think that to get past this logjam that the attorney referred to, the township attorney cannot continue to converse by email, by written communication, and phone with individual board members with any expectation that those communications can be withheld from any other board member. Because he serves all of you, not individual members. And that's a huge issue that's rearing its ugly head in this litigation that Ms. Eckhout has filed against this board.
What
Because
body of law
it's my public comment, okay? So, in the FOIA denials that she is now in litigation over with this township, the denials were pertaining to attorney-client communications that were exchanged between your attorney and individual board members. She is absolutely entitled to obtain any communication that he submits to any individual one of you. Absolutely. So that is why she's having to sue you, the board, to obtain those informations because they were wrongfully withheld. Okay? So if you can't figure that out and your attorney can't figure that out, you need to read the Freedom of Information Act, and you need to also understand the conflicts of interest, which, you know, you have to look that loyalty is an essential element to the attorney-client relationship. And when you go to the conflicts of interest, regarding an organization, a lawyer representing an organization may also represent any of its directors, officers, employees, members, shareholders, or other constituents subject to the provisions of Rule 1.7. If the organization's consent to the dual representation is required by Rule 1.7, the consent shall be given by an appropriate official of the organization other than the individual who is to be represented. So what that means is in this litigation, your attorney filed appearances on behalf of the township and each one of you who were so individually named in your official capacity. And when he filed that appearance, he did so without Ms. Eckhout's consent. And then you move on to Michigan Rule, Professional Rule of Conduct 1.7, which was referenced in the previous rule.
15 seconds, sir.
A lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation of that client will be directly adverse to another client. That's what he's continuing to do over and over by communicating individually with you over and over with communications by email, by writing, and by phone without her knowledge and without her being able to access those communications. And she is entitled to those. And this lady went about 10 minutes.
That's
She
right.
went 10 minutes.
Well,
She went 10 minutes.
All right, go ahead, finish.
So I'm going to continue to read this. A lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation of the client will be directly adverse to another client. Obviously, there's an adverse relationship here, unless the lawyer reasonably believes that the representation will not adversely affect the relationship with the other client. Obviously, that's not the case. And each client consents after consultation. When was Ms. Eckhout ever consulted with regards to whether or not she consented to allow your attorney to file an appearance on your behalf? Never. And that conflict provision of the Michigan Rules of Professional Conduct prohibit that. It goes on. A lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation of that client may be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibilities to another client or to a third person, or by the lawyer's own interest, unless, 1, the lawyer reasonably believes the representation will not be adversely affected, and the client consents after consultation. The consultation never occurred, consent never occurred. There's an absolute, actual conflict. He cannot represent them, and thank God he called the insurance company and they're appointing someone else because he's absolutely going to have to withdraw. He's a witness to the case. He's been instrumental in withholding these communications between himself and individual board members, and she's entitled to all of them.
Here, thank you so much. Anybody else have another? Yes, please step up. I am going to adhere to the 3-minute rule now because we are getting very late.
It won't take me 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth.
I'd like to know how much money you've made off this township in the last year. And I want you guys to know, he says he is our lawyer. He works for the township. He works for us. When we ask him for information, that he's talking to you folks who work for us, when we ask him for that information, we should get it. Because he is working for you. You work for us,
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
right?
Yes.
Isn't that what you said?
No.
You said you work for the township.
My client is the Township of Arcadia as a municipal
And
entity.
I am a member of this township.
No, you're a resident of the township, you are not my client.
You
Nor
work
is
for the
treasurer
township.
My client. My client is the Township
You work
of
for the
Arcadia.
township.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank
Knock
you.
yourself out.
Any other public comment?
One question, is it legal for someone that's on the board to come in the audience and get consultation? I don't
I don't think
know.
there's any laws.
I don't think there's laws.
Is there a place I can pay my taxes besides the township?
I'll be here.
No, I'm talking, can I go to Manistee or somewhere else?
Not until they're old.
No, not
So I have to be delinquent?
Sir, you can send them to P.O. Box 318, that's the official address,
Okay.
and that's where the clerk picks up the mail or her designee.
There's a lockbox out there.
And there's a
Okay.
lockbox here that
Okay.
you can
That's,
utilize.
because on the, when I got my sale and my taxes, it was a personal address.
That would be the treasurer's, and that was at her discretion. She changed that without prior knowledge to the board.
And your other option, which Debbie was about to say, is
I'll be here on the 14th. It's Valentine's Day. You bring me a flower.
I want to thank everybody too.
Thank you, thank you. Any other public comment? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.